I now call the Snoqualmie City Council meeting to order. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Sunwall, can you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Officer Jones, please take the roll call.
Councilmember Jeans.
Here.
Councilmember Ross. Here. Councilmember Holloway.
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Here.
Councilmember Lassay.
He's asked to be excused.
Councilmember Sunwall.
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Here.
Mayor Larson.
I am here. Council may have a motion and a second to excuse Councilmember Lassay from tonight's
So
meeting.
moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to excuse. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Council have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Councilmember Shepherd.
So I'd like to remove the warrants, AB 19-136, AB 19-138, AB 19-140, and AB 19-122.
Okay.
Can you repeat what was left?
I think it would be easy just to say only want to leave AB 144 on there. So the only thing for the consent agenda is an agenda bill, 144. All right, any other comments or discussion? Councilmember Jeans.
I would like to add something to the committee of the whole, a discussion from the Public Engagement Committee regarding town hall meeting.
Second.
The fourth quarter town hall meeting.
Okay, we'll take that as a motion. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
According to Wikipedia,
Opposed?
motion is the change in the position of an object over time.
That's me, so
Wow. Did someone say, hey, Google or something, or what?
I have no idea what initiated that. Someone, yeah, I'm not sure. Okay. We had a vote on the approving the agenda with the, oh, I'm sorry, no, we're back to the, any other items for the agenda? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. All right, apologize for the virtual reality interference. All right, with that, we'll move on to public hearings, presentations, proclamations, and appointments. At this time, the public hearing regarding the levying of property taxes is now open. We got some sign-in sheets that came in rather late, but don't worry about that. If I doubt that there's any names on there, given that it probably didn't arrive. Gwen, are there any names on the sign-up sheets? No. Okay. Is there anyone that would like to comment on this item, on the levying of property taxes? This is basically every year, the council has to set the levy rate that goes to the King County. So Wayne, go ahead.
Wayne Russell, 8438 Meadowbrook Way, Southeast. Anyhow, my thing is with trying to raise levy rates and everything is we get an automatic one every year, so I wish this would be starting to be taken into consideration. King County Assessor. Now, I don't know, Mr. Mayhew's shaking his head for some reason, but anyhow, I believe our rates should stay where they're at because we already are paying quite a bit. And I agree that it goes to a lot of the people that supposedly need pay raises, but I think people really start to live in the real world and start looking at what salaries really are at. And we keep talking the so-called affordable housing, and the minimum wage is going to go up to $13.50 an hour here in January. So what happens to the people that are making $14 and $15 an hour? Are they going to get pay raises? Probably not. And more businesses are going to go under. So anyhow, I think our real estate taxes should stay where they're at. Anyhow, thank you.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Anybody else like to speak this time? Anna?
Anna Sotelo, 39075 Southeast Gamma Street. Just two things I wanted to, after sitting through the F&A meeting and hearing a council member suggest it, and then thinking myself, it is really difficult for us to have a public hearing when the presentation hasn't been given. And I know the council member was concerned about how he would have the knowledge to understand what citizens are talking about. But for me, it's that, don't you want citizens to be more educated before we stand up here and talk? And I know, and it was very well, and I want to commend, I guess, Joan, who's our social media, that it was really well advertised, promoted, that it was going on. Since Thursday, it's been really well promoted. But the point is that the material was on the agenda, but I haven't had a chance to read it. I was away all weekend, and I haven't had a chance. So I would prefer not having a public hearing right now. I'd prefer having Drew do his presentation, understand it, and then have it in a public hearing. And I think in the spirit of transparency, thank you, it's really, those are kind of the right steps. And so that I wanted to say. The other was, I just want to remind you, like I have for the last 2 years, that business owners are the ones that take on that 1% hit when it comes to the property owner's property. It's in the triple net. So again, our rent would bump up, a lot. It'd be $500 to $700 usually every year by that 1%, because those buildings are $1 million buildings. So we pay that. So again, that's a real burden. Residents, I don't know. But as business owners, I've been reminding you. So over the last 15 years for Ridge, that's 15, it just adds up. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Anna. Does anyone else like to speak on this issue at this time? All right, seeing no one else come forward, the public hearing is now closed. All right, we're moving on to a presentation recognizing police officers who have served, given that it's been Veterans Day week, appropriate to recognize those officers that have served or are serving in the military. So at this point, I invite the chief up. This is sort of a nice welcome distraction for the chief, given the calamity that befell his household last night. So.
I knew you were going to take an opportunity.
Chief's a 49ers fan.
No, it's loyal. Give me credit for being loyal. I'm going to send this to San Francisco Niners area, commending you. Would you come on? Thank you for giving me an opportunity. Just briefly wanted to recognize some of our officers. Yesterday we did, as a nation, we did recognize and honor those that have served in the military. And I've always thought that maybe we ought to recognize them every day, not just one day. And it's just, I've never been in the military. And it's amazing to me that, first of all, they serve our country, and then they come back and they serve our community. And I think that the citizens should know when they make contact with them and they're having a discussion with them that these are special people right here. And I'll just give you the names, the branch that they were in and how long they were in. And then I'm going to give them they're going to have a little gift, if you will. It's not just a gift, it's something they earned, but this is going to go on their uniform. It's going to be part of their uniform. And this is going to go on their right breast pocket, and it's going to acknowledge that they served in the military and still serving. So that's quite an honor to be wearing something on your Class A uniform to designate your service and your commitment to this community and to this nation. So first one is Detective Scott Bruton, who's not here. He's the only one that's not here. We have 7, which is great. He was in the U.S. Coast Guard, and he served for 4 years. Officer Rick Carey, he's served in the Army, active 5 years, and is now in the Air Force Air National Guard for 13 years, and he's still counting. In fact, he's going to be deployed in the next few months for service, and so he's still an active military person. We have Ethan Sarles, Officer Sarles, with his daughter, and served in the Army for 5 years. Captain Nick Almquist served in the Air Force for 6 years. Officer Christopher Weary, Army Reserve for 6 years. Support Officer Larry Warren in the Navy for 10 years. and Officer John Fishbeck in the U.S. Coast Guard for 8 years. So I just wanted to commend those of you that are here for your service, not just to this community, making us better, but also your service in the military. Highly commendable. And I sent you each an email yesterday, and I truly meant that I look up to you guys and honor you guys for that. So. Thank you again. I'm going to pass this around so you know what the pin looks, the council can take a look at it and know what it says.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And thanks to the other officers coming out to support your fellow officers and firefighters as well. Thank you. Thank you for your service, gentlemen,
Did you want to take a picture?
both to our country and to our community.
Very nice.
All right. Now, next up, we have a couple presentations, and Laura, it occurred to me, I'm not sure if you guys have a sense of what, because they're kind of overlap each other with the Snoqualmie Valley Community Services and Human Services. Any sense of what would be appropriate to go first? All right. So, Laura, why don't you go ahead and queue up then?
There's 3 things there. There's a card, this, and that.
Thank you. Laura Smith from the Snoqualmie Valley Community Network. And we were here a couple of months ago just popping in for public comment. And Jody, I think it was Jody Warren who suggested, and Councilmember Ross, that we come in and do a more formal presentation. So I'm here tonight to do that formal presentation to you. But I want to start first and foremost with thanking you, council members, for your continued dedication to the city, the residents of the city of Snoqualmie. I also want to thank you for being a leader in regards to human services funding, not just in the valley, definitely in the valley, but also in our region. One of the pieces of work that the network has been doing with the site is looking at how cities allocate their human services funding and what kind of investment they make. And Snoqualmie is definitely leading in the valley on that work. So thank you very much for that commitment. And in particular, with the Snoqualmie Valley Community Network, I wanted to thank you for the 2019 investment of $5,000 and then the 2020 investment of $30,000. And tonight I'm going to lay out for you how that 2019 investment has been allocated and the impact that has made on the residents of the city of Snoqualmie, as well as the unincorporated areas around that. So most of you know this, but I feel I'll touch on it. The vision of the Snoqualmie Valley Community Network is building better futures for youth. Our mission is to promote and inspire youth to lead safe, healthy, and successful lives. And we have a couple of key values that really play into this, and that's that youth play an essential role in our communities, and that you can't have healthy youth if you don't have healthy families, and you can't have healthy families if you don't also have a healthy community. And at the root of all of that is meaningful partnership. So you'll see the Snoqualmie Valley Community Network involved in programs that cross all of those demographics, as well as looking at how we can better partner with our human services, fellow human service organizations to become even better at delivering the services that we do have in the Snoqualmie Valley. The first slide of each of these is going to show you the impact of the network's work valley-wide. So far in the 2018-19 in the 2018-19 fiscal year, and then the next slide will show you specific to Snoqualmie Valley. But during the 2018-19 fiscal year, 1,843 students throughout the Snoqualmie Valley received our suicide prevention training, which is called How to Help a Friend. That model is based on a peer-to-peer model where we train older teens to go into middle schools and train them in how to recognize when a friend might be struggling. What does depression look like? What is stress? How does that feel? What are healthy ways to cope with stress? This has been essential in really developing kind of our front line of, because kids tend to go to each other before they come to us. And so we've really been able to increase the likelihood that a student hearing that from a friend is going to go ahead and share that information with a trusted adult so that we can get them the help that they need. 171 students throughout the Valley had the opportunity of exploring different career choices. Some of you have actually been involved with this program from the beginning. It's called Pathways to Employment Success. This is something about the networks where most of our programming comes up out of what the community is asking us for. This particular program, Pathways to Employment Success, was rooted in a student panel where we were asking students about some Healthy Youth Survey data from 2016 that showed that our kids were showing in 10th grade greater rates of thinking about suicide, hopelessness, worry, anxiety. So we went to the source, help us understand what this means. And they told us, a couple different panels actually, one in Issaquah as well, told us that that anxiety and those data points that were making them their data higher in those areas than their same age people in the rest of King County. So Snoqualmie Valley, both school districts merged, our data was worse than the rest of King County for 10th graders. So they said to us, what's happening there is that they feel like we as a community throughout the Valley are giving them this message that there's one pathway to success and that it starts by 7th, 8th grade. You need to really know what you're going to do, what school you're going to go to. You need to be in the right classes so that you're on the right track, plugging along. You need to be getting straight A's, probably playing at least one select sport, and volunteering in your spare time. If you weren't doing that, then you were a failure. So we took that information in and developed the Pathways to Employment Success program to help, because the way we figure it, students get to see the career paths of their parents and education. And so our hope in partnering with the chambers in the Valley, as well as both school districts, is to help expose them to many different paths, whether it's a certification program, a 4-year, an 8-year, so that way kids really have some additional information when they're making that choice. And coupled in that is also education of us as a community in the way that we talk to kids about what success is and how to find success in life. 111 students participate in student leadership. We have 2 programs in the Valley, 2 youth councils, and we also host an annual event specifically for middle schoolers. We host it at Chief Canum. This will be year 14. 35 students were positively impacted in the Valley last year by being paired up with a mentor through the Youth Success Mentoring Program. That is currently expanding to all of the elementary schools in Snoqualmie Valley School District. And I would be remiss if I didn't plant a seed to everyone here about considering becoming a mentor. It's a 45-minute-a-week commitment during the school year, and it's rooted in building a positive, consistent, caring relationship with a student. What we know is that positive, consistent, caring relationships have long-term implications for if a kid stays in school, it's a dropout prevention. If a kid makes healthy choices related to substance abuse, it actually even impacts whether they decide to go on to volunteer later on if they've had a positive, consistent, caring adult in their lives. 160, we don't do the Power Pack program at this end of the Valley. You have a former food bank entity that does the weekend Power Pack piece, so I'll leave that off. Oh, and then down below, part of our substance use prevention programs are positive messaging campaigns that we run at both Mount Si High School as well as Cedar Crest High School, where we engage youth in a marketing campaign. It's, again, rooted in Healthy Youth Survey data. Kids tend to overreport, misrepresent the percentage of their peers who are using substances. And so we engage them in coming up with messaging, and then we use the Healthy Youth Survey data to disprove or help them correct their misperceptions. So the campaign at Mount Si is rooted in 8 out of 10 students in 10th grade level chose not to smoke marijuana in the last 30 days. And they came up with the tagline, "Your life, your choice." And all of the marketing that we do around that is student-led. So specific to Snoqualmie, I'll go faster here. 463 students from Snoqualmie received the How to Help a Friend suicide prevention training. 36 of them joined us on our Pathways to Employment Success activities. 34 participated in youth leadership. 23 have a mentor. 4 participated in, oh, that is not the correct number. The entire population at Opstead Elementary School, so 400 plus. We have a new program that we piloted in the spring at Opstead called Be Kind Snoqualmie Valley. Hopefully you've seen it. The idea, I'm really tired in my job of successful suicides occurring, and we really took a step back and said, how can we get as far upstream as we possibly can? And out of that emerged the Be Kind Snoqualmie Valley movement. Piloted in the spring, and then this fall, it is launching at every elementary school in Snoqualmie Valley School District. What it is a positive school climate campaign where alongside your regular learning targets for math and language arts, you also have kindness challenges. So every week, there's 3 kindness challenges on the board, and the teacher spends time talking about those challenges and actually modeling for you, what does it look like when you're paying a genuine compliment? What does it look like? And then the kids select one of those 3, and over the course of the week, it's their job to practice it. And on Friday, they circle back up and talk about how they did it, and then it carries on into the next week with some more kindness challenges. So I've been really pleased with the school district support. This falls under one of the priority areas that we all identified under our Portrait of a Graduate. The empathy component, if any of you participated in those community conversations. So the school district has been alongside the network in promoting the Be Kind Snoqualmie Valley campaigns. And the goal is that the next year it will move up into the middle schools and then further up. All right, community outreach. Many of you are familiar with this. This first number is funny. So 118 parents took parent education from us in 1819. 2 weeks ago, 160 parents took the Hidden in Plain Sight workshop at Mount Si. So we're seeing a significant change in parent engagement around education related to substance use and abuse, largely because of the loss of student life over in Sammamish. 262 people from the city of Snoqualmie attended, the Valley, attended the gala. 30 people joined our resiliency teams. We have 2 resiliency teams in the Snoqualmie Valley. The idea is to engage cross-sector in strategies that will help our families and our youth build the capacity to work through life's difficult challenges and come out on the other side. It's not the concept that bad stuff doesn't happen. It's the concept that bad stuff happens, and there are tools that we can put in our tool belt that can help us be successful later. Like, it doesn't have to define us. This particular resiliency team for Snoqualmie Valley area, one of the biggest initiatives that they've been able to put into place is called, I'm blanking on our thing. Essentially, I can't remember the name of it. Matt, maybe you can.
I know, I'm blanking on it too. Sorry.
Law enforcement might be able to remember.
I was looking for Mark.
Essentially, it's the ability to, when a first responder goes out on a call, they are able to handle with care. Thank you. Yeah, geez. They are able to identify if there's a child who might be experiencing trauma at that call. In the past, we haven't had a great tool for communicating that from the first responder to the school, because when the child gets to school the next day, they very well are going to be manifesting any number of trauma behaviors. They could be acting out, they could be shut down, they could be falling asleep. So this is a simple mechanism where school district or first responder is able to make connection with the school district and say, Laura Smith at Opstead needs to be handled with care. And then the district takes it and delivers it where it needs to go. So that way the teachers and the staff know how to work with me the next day. Numbers for the city of Snoqualmie. We have really great involvement from this end of the valley. So my call to action for you, you already do so much, so this is a light call to action. Just in our research, we also noted that Snoqualmie is the only city that we know of that has a human services section or addendum to the comprehensive plan. That's unheard of. So on other city slides, this is usually me going, hey, can you please consider adding a human services component to your plan. Something I hope that all of the cities continue to keep in mind as they look to growth. I hear a lot of, oh, we can't fund that because we're working on infrastructure. And I get that. The roads, the sidewalks, our capacity to move about our community. But at the end of the day, the humans are the number one infrastructure. So I'm hoping that all of the cities in the valley will continue to see that as infrastructure number one. And attending an upcoming event, I passed around the Snoqualmie Valley Community Network's annual Heart of the Valley Gala is coming up. This is our biggest event of the year up at the Snoqualmie Casino on February 8th. We hosted a pretty awesome event actually last week at Infusion Bar and Grill, which was just the concept kind of was, let's get to know Snoqualmie Ridge a little bit better. And Benny, who just won America's Got Talent, showed up and performed. And so it was just fun. So if you watch, we're trying to mix it up a little bit in some of the eventing that we're doing. And lastly, again, if you have 45 minutes a week that you could commit to a kid, I will say I am super busy and I mentor every Wednesday for 45 minutes, and it's the best part of my day. I build my entire regular work schedule around Grace. So, thank you. Any questions?
Councilmember Sewell.
So it's been a very, very rough few weeks for the Lower Valley on these topics. And I'm just curious, when these unfortunate events happen, does this create greater opportunity for a group like yours to engage? And if so, I don't want to say take advantage of the situation because it's not what I mean, but I think you know what I mean. Do these create opportunities to open eyes, and then are you guys able to swoop in sort of unexpectedly because you hope this never happens, but it does?
Yeah.
And if so, even if you can't speak to this particular most recent instances, does that opportunity present itself?
It does. It definitely does. And I was explaining to Joan, we have a commitment every year to host, or we've made a commitment every year to host a youth mental health first aid training in each end of the valley. We're hosting one here on Saturday. It's just the regular scheduled program. Because that event was sitting there waiting when these other events happened, that event filled up like that. We've now had to add 5 more on that end of the valley. So, and this is not an hour and a half parent-ed. This is a 9-hour youth mental health first aid, how to recognize pretty much every mental health challenge that your student could be facing. I fully expect that we're going to have to keep adding into the spring.
So you guys do have the flexibility to add those types of things
We try
on
to
the
be
heels
nimble.
of an event we all wish didn't happen.
Yeah, we try to be as nimble as we can.
Okay.
Because I feel that, and another example of that would be, a few years ago, we used to provide the suicide prevention at the high school in Snoqualmie Valley School District as well. And then we had the opportunity for the University of Washington to offer a grant to Mount Si, where they could fully wrap around all components of suicide prevention in a way that we couldn't do. We also recognized that and moved to the side so that they could come in and do that. Because at that particular time, that was the year where if you were a senior at Mount Si, you would have lost someone every year in your high school career. And it was bigger. It was a little bigger than us. And I've connected, actually, Riverview School District to Forefront as well, with the intention of stepping aside at the high school level and continuing our middle school efforts, because something is, the last family is very close to me, so this is a little, because it's bigger than what the network can do right now at the high school, and so they really need that extra substantive programming.
Well, thank you for what you are doing.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. It's a brief one. Councilmember Shepherd, then Councilmember Jeans, and then we'll wrap it up there.
So the Hidden in Plain Sight, I was on the Snoqualmie Valley School District Parents of Facebook group, and
Yes.
there's people that wanted to sign up, and I understand that you recently had 2 classes and they were full.
We
And
did
then-
host 2, and then we had people not show up. Like a third of both nights didn't show up. So that just will emphasize my frustration with RSVPing. But we will offer Hidden in Plain Sight again. as well as continue to try to promote on the Parents of SVSD site when it's offered in, it's a partnership that we have with Sammamish and Issaquah. And we are also working with the school district. What limited us on that particular event, Hidden in Plain Sight, is based on bringing in a student's room where, like a mock student's room, where there's signs of substance abuse going on within the room. And for lack of a better word, it's like a scavenger hunt to see what you, as the parent, could find in that room that would give you a red flag. So the limiting number is because only so many people can functionally go through the room at a certain time. So I have engaged in a conversation with the school district about removing the room, because we have slides that show everything that's in the room, and we can do the same presentation and talk through the slide content, and people, it's not as engaging, I would say, in terms of like, can I really find this? But it's still the content, and we could do it in the auditorium and have several hundred people at the same time.
Sounds good.
I'll
Thanks.
pass that along. We've been talking about it.
Councilmember Jeans.
So Laura, it seems like you might start in the elementary schools, but is your target age, what is it?
Our age is kindergarten through 18,
And,
or if you're 19, through high school.
and so what's your sweet spot of the kids that you're trying to impact? Where do you think that there's the greatest need? Is it a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, or a 17-year-old?
So the answer I will always have to this is any kind of prevention is better earlier. So the earlier you can make a connection, and I believe that the route to all suicide and substance use prevention as well is connection. So focusing the efforts at the elementary level is a high priority for us.
Laura, thank you so much for all the good work you do. And I think a good segue at this point then is to invite presentation on human services funding. Okay, Carson. And appreciate the members of our Human Services Advisory Committee for all being here tonight. Yeah, 2 out of 3.
Don't go there.
Last one. Oh, no. Yeah. There we go.
Oh,
That's not it either. Nope, it's the other one,
Oh, that's 1406. Is it not
middle
open?
one. Try the middle one.
Is it not open, or?
Well, thank you for playing it.
We start closing. stuff.
Carson, what type of presentation is it?
I
What
think
for-
it was a PDF
A PDF?
that was uploaded to the agenda.
There it is.
There we go. The link's right there, Human Services, under presentations. There we go.
Awesome.
All right. 6 times the charm. That's all right.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Carson Hornsby. I'm a management analyst with the Administrative Services Department, and I am one of 2 staff liaisons to our Human Services Advisory Committee. The other is my supervisor, Deborah Vigil, who is not here this evening. Our council liaison is Councilmember Mayhew, and our Human Services Advisory Committee members are Carol Peterson, Ann Logelin, and Sarah Weisel. And I'd like to thank them all for being here this evening. The reason why I've set aside this time at tonight's council meeting is to give the council an update on our human services funding. As you I'm sure you're all aware, the mission of our human services funding is to support nonprofit organizations in the Snoqualmie Valley that are helping people in need. And in order to help us meet that goal with more efficiency, we've made a number of updates to our program this year. The first of which is we've switched to a 2-year funding cycle, and that allows us to stay in sync with our biennial budget planning. We've also increased the committee member terms to 2 years to coincide with this or the 2-year funding cycle as well. We've made a number of updates to our funding scorecard, which we use to determine what organizations will get funding and how much of it. And perhaps the biggest update we've made to the committee this year is the addition of an accountability form, which we use to determine whether or not we will continue funding organizations based on past results. And I will go into a little bit more detail about the funding scorecard and our accountability form a little bit later in my presentation. So for this biennial cycle of 2019 and 2020, the committee put together funding priorities for our human services funds based on research into what other cities are prioritizing, and also based on some of the problems that are a little bit more unique to the city of Snoqualmie. And as a result of that process, we've put together the following funding priorities: 40% going towards food to eat and a roof overhead, 30% towards supporting and preparing youth for success, 15% towards a safe haven from violence and abuse, and the remaining 15% is going towards physical and mental wellness as well as healthy aging. So assuming an organization serves Snoqualmie residents and they meet one or more of those funding priorities, we welcome them to submit an application for human services funding. And within that application, we ask them to outline a number of things, including the purpose of their funding request, giving a description of their organization, if they have supporting partnerships in place currently to determine where their funding comes from, the results of prior funding if they were awarded human services funds in the past, the accessibility of their services to the community, and then last but not least, the administrative and overhead costs of their program to make sure that as much of the money as possible is going straight back into the community. After all was said and done, we received 16 applications, and we were able to fully fund 15 of those based on our scoring process. So what we have up here on the screen is the most updated copy of our funding scorecard that we use to grade or score the applications that we received. The committee went through each application and asked the following questions in the categories outlined on the top of the scorecard. Is the application complete? Does the program meet one of the 4 funding priorities? Is the applicant established in the community? Does the program serve Snoqualmie residents? Does the program outline unique services and avoid duplicating what is already available? Does the program service cost per funding request appear reasonable? Are program outcomes valid and achievable? Are the services easily accessible by members of the community? If the applicant received past funds, were they used effectively? And lastly, is the organization inclusive of all groups? Based on the answers to those questions, the organizations were scored on a scale of 2 to 10 for each of those questions, and they were given a total score out of 100 points in order to determine if they would receive funding and how much. So as a result of this scoring process, we were able to put together a budget for 2019 and 2020. Listed up here are 15 different organizations that we are funding in this biennium. The funding ranges anywhere from $1,500 up to $44,000. And in total, in 2019, we've allocated $225,327. And in 2020, we've set aside $232,287. So recently we have received quite a few accountability forms back, and that is one of the biggest additions to the program this year. The idea behind our accountability form is that we are interested in collecting as much information about where our human services funding is going in order to make a more informed decision on whether we should continue to fund these organizations. And this process is currently set up as two payments will go out to each organization per year, so 4 in this biennial cycle. And the first payment is a result of a successful application, and the final 3 are the result of a completed accountability form that is approved by our advisory committee. In that accountability form, we ask the organizations to go over the activities that they've participated in and how they align with their scope of work and service contract agreed to by the city and the organization. We also asked them for the percentage of the funding that went directly to Snoqualmie residents, and more specifically within the 98065 zip code. We also asked them to outline the additional funding sources, if they have any, that they were able to procure as a result of the funding that the city gave them. We also asked them for a more personal client story to get a better idea about how this funding is touching individual lives in the community. And lastly, we gave them an opportunity to provide any more additional information or unique services that their organization offers. And as a result of these accountability forms, we've received quite a bit of good news back and a lot more information about what this money is being used for. So I just wanted to give the council, go over some of the funding highlights that we've seen from the funding thus far in the year. Encompass used their funding to put together a trauma-informed care training pilot program that they're in the process of implementing in all elementary schools in the district. The Snoqualmie Valley Food Bank funded a summer meals program and distributed supplies in the community, and they were also able to serve members of our senior, veteran, and immigrant populations here in the city. The Mount Si Senior Center served 91 seniors, a total of 3,485 times so far in 2019. And Snoqualmie Valley Shelter Services, job and housing assistance, shower and laundry services, access to a full kitchen, clothing and toiletries, as well as technology access in their resource center. St. Vincent de Paul offered assistance to 26 households within Snoqualmie. Two Rivers School offered 2 on-site visits from a mental health and chemical dependency counselor. Snoqualmie Valley Community Network put on a number of campaigns and workshops covering topics such as peer pressure and youth suicide prevention. They were able to reach many hundreds of students in the Snoqualmie Valley, and I think we saw some updated numbers there earlier, so that's reassuring as well. LifeWire supported 7 different families in the city of Snoqualmie, and that accounted for 12 different people. Eastside Baby Corner was able to deliver 617 orders of critical needs items to children, to 85 different children. CarePoint Clinic funded a soundproof exam room, insurance, as well as clinic phone services for their patients. Skyview Community Foundation awarded aquatics and swimming scholarships, and 71% of those went to children within the 98065 zip code. Snow Valley Indoor Playground purchased new playmats and a rolling cart for storage. And last but not least here, we have Trail Youth. They saw 36 teens participating in their barista leadership or mentorship programs, and that includes 12 children from Snoqualmie. So I collected some quotes from our committee members, but as you can see, they're all here tonight. And instead of trying to put their words in my voice, I want to invite them to come up here and talk directly to the council to give their input on how they think the program is working and areas for improvement and such. So if any of them are so inclined, I'd like to open the floor to them at this point. Any takers?
You could even read your quote rather than him reading it.
I can wing it. Ann Loglin, I live right next door on Maple Avenue. You can read what it says there, but I just feel that we have a lot of confidence. Our group has a lot of confidence in the program now, and I think that's because of some changes that we made, the funding priorities, the scorecard, and then the accountability forms. It's just a very good package. It's clear, it's concise. We're able to quickly go through the applications and make sure that, what we're doing is going to help the community in the end. So.
I'm Carol Peterson, and I live on Maple Avenue. As you can see there, I think our priority numbering was really outstanding to me, that we debated how to do it and changed our minds a couple of times. And I'm really pleased with that, and especially our accountability. When I worked at a huge foundation for 10 years, I had to introduce an accountability program. And I just think it's very necessary to follow up with groups to see how they're actually spending the money, not just keep asking. And I really have appreciated Councilman Mayhew being with us almost every meeting and adding comments that he thought the council would be helpful with. And Carson, too, and our original Eric that was with us have been very helpful in establishing this program, because I think it's one of the outstanding ones on the east side, and I think you should be very proud of the money you've allocated to these, and especially going full bore on 235,000 this year that we wanted for everything, and we were able to fund everything, and that's very heartwarming. And lots of Snoqualmie residents have been helped by it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
And my name's Sarah Weisel. I just wanted to add that it's been a real honor to work with this committee and to be part of the committee. But the accountability forms have really been an additional way for us to not just look through the forms, assess them, but to follow through with how the money is being used, make sure that's pairing up with the scope of work, but then also have a chance to see through those personal stories or through the additional follow-ups with each organization how the money is really being used in the area. And it's been really an exciting opportunity for us to see those results back, not just see the applications at each start of the reviewing process. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with the council as the liaison to this group that that they have made. I'll just remind you that Carson, could you take us back to page 2? Yeah. Just remind you that this is the work that they've done over the last 2 years has been tremendous. They've substantially changed the whole program under which we do human services here. This was initially at this council's request, but the way that they've followed through, I think, has been even more than we had asked for, and they really took to heart what we were asking for and have really driven this home. So we asked them for a strategic plan, and I'll remind you, a year ago, they came back to us with a very well thought out strategic plan. Those funding priorities were recommended. They went through a whole process, which they went through with us at the time, and then we approved those funding priorities. They went through a whole process to come up with those that they thought were specific to Snoqualmie. And then we agreed with them and approved that. We then approved the recommendations they made using those funding priorities, and we fully funded. And in fact, this year, we will fund the largest dollar amount budget that we've ever spent on human services, which is fantastic, something I think the citizens of our city can be very proud of. But at the same time, I'll tell you, there is tremendous more need as well. So the idea that they've not just reported to us tonight, all those 2 pages of outcomes, this is a somewhat unique thing. Normally, we hear what the applicants are telling us they will do. What we actually heard tonight was the report back on what they have done with the money that we've given. And that is, that level of accountability and follow through is rare, and I think something that we can be really pleased with. And I'll tell you, it was something new. They had to kind of work with some of the organizations to get those accountability forms. They're not used to just turning those in, so they kind of worked with them to get those, and now we get a real visibility onto what's happened. So so this is the first time we've seen that outcome feedback. The amount of work that this committee, the 3 ladies that spoke to us tonight, have done is significant. It's challenging work, and they've done just a fantastic job at it. I think the whole community owes them a debt of gratitude, and I certainly think that we as a council should be are in their debt for doing this fantastic work and helping to distribute this, helping us to distribute this money on behalf of the city.
All right, I think we only have time probably for one more question. Councilmember Jean.
So I'm curious, you've taken care of the years 19 and 20, and how will you transition, because you will have new committee members for the 21, 22, how will that transition go?
So I haven't talked with my supervisor about what the plan is for funding beyond this biennium. But I would assume that as we get closer to 2021, that we'll start taking a look at new applications for committee members and also making sure that the funding priorities are still applicable, et cetera. I can touch base with her and get back to you if you're interested in that, a more clear answer to that.
Maybe I haven't heard news that they're resigning or something. There's nothing precludes the committee members from continuing their work and being reappointed. So Bob, that question is really more for me.
That is true.
As you know,
Sorry.
I appoint all members to commissions and committees.
So I believe that the work will start in.
And I'm sorry, well, you're going to come back.
I believe the work will actually start in spring of 2020 because it took us that long to get through it for the 19 stuff. So in the strategic plan, it basically says that we're going to be starting that work, so.
Good.
Then we'll have to transition, if there's new people, we'll have to transition them as we get them.
Yeah, they'll just take over the same I mean, the nice thing is there's a system and a protocol that's been built, yeah.
Correct.
Councilmember Sunwell.
So, first of all, Carol, Charles must be so proud of you. The work you're continuing on, I think it's just fantastic what you're doing. And Ann and Sarah as well, thank you. Leading volunteer organizations is very, very difficult. It's a thankless job. We've had 2 presentations today of very, very successful volunteer organizations who are really making a difference in our community. The question I have, and maybe this is something, Jim, you can handle offline, is as we, believe it or not, enter the next biennium budget discussion this coming spring, I would like to at least have an understanding as we look to what that allocation would look like in the next 2-year block. What are we missing? So if we had an unlimited budget, which of course we don't, what other services or organizations could we help if we had 10% more, 30% more, 50% more? So at least we can know when we have that discussion around this budget item, what we're leaving on the table or not. And so that would, I don't expect an answer now, but I would like that as we head in the next 6 months to our next budget planning cycle to have a better understanding of what that looks like.
Councilmember Ross, let's conclude the conversation with you.
So my comment is I was actually one of the first residents to sit on the Human Services Committee, and I think it was like 2007, something like that, when it was newly formed.
Yes.
And I love the strategic approach that you're taking, determining the funding of priorities and the amount of money that we're giving to local organizations. So it's quite different than, 12 years ago, so nice job.
Great. Well, thank you all. And again, great work. I appreciate the work the Human Service Committee has done. I did want to note, I should have probably said it in queuing up this whole conversation, that for members of the public, there may be wondering, why is the city giving a bunch of money to private or nonprofit organizations? Our mandate from the state distills down to 3 things that the city is responsible for, and that's to tend to the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And there are a lot of needs in the community that we're not really structured with fire, police, and parks and conventional departments to take care of. Larger cities have Department of Social and Health Services departments. We don't have that, and the economies of scale simply isn't there. You can see that we can make those dollars and the impact go so much further in the community by partnering with social service agencies in the community, helping them to help us and those in the community. So that's the idea. The Human Services Advisory Committee, of course, does work on behalf of the council and my administration to interface with those agencies and to try and vet out and give us direction on what they think would be the best and wisest way to use those dollars. So again, we're not donating money. We are contracting for services, delivering a service that we're obligated and mandated to deliver for the community. So again, thank you. All right. My only observation too, and we could talk about it later, Carson, is maybe it's on there, but I didn't notice a criteria that evaluated sort of a ratio of administrative overhead costs to delivery. In other words, you might want to avoid some nonprofit organization that has 80% overhead and only 20% goes to those they're serving. And so that might be, I think, a good one to measure as well.
Good luck getting that past these 3 ladies.
Okay. Or is it in there?
So I forgot to mention on the slide about our application, as part of the application, we asked them to submit the scope of work, a proof of their nonprofit status, a copy of their financial statements, and also a list of their board of directors.
Okay, so in those financial statements, you guys can get a sense of that, yeah. Perfect, okay.
And Mary, do you just think, just a big thank you to the committee members. Thank you very much on behalf of the city.
All right, and no one's going to be offended if the four of you want to head out and enjoy the rest of your evening too, so, but you're certainly welcome to stay. All right, with that, at this time, we're going to take citizens' comments. First, a few ground rules. One, Snoqualmie citizens who are not present have a right to have their elected representatives perform their duties on behalf of the city in an efficient and orderly manner. Therefore, comments for those who are attending will be limited to 3 minutes each. 2, please wait to be recognized. Come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. 3, direct your comments to the council as a whole and not to individual members. In order to protect the privacy rights of employees and protect the members of the public from legal liability, please note that this is not an appropriate venue to make complaints or accusations about an implied or named city employee or agent. Such oral comments will not be allowed but can be submitted in writing to the city clerk. 4, please note that this is not a time to ask questions of the council, mayor, or staff, or to engage in debate. The council will simply quietly and respectfully listen to your concerns. 5th, please respect the decorum of these proceedings, as all due respect will be afforded to you. And last is note that the public comments will be audio recorded but not video recorded, at least for those not pertaining to items on the agenda per council action on September 9th, 2019. So with that, is there anybody, member of the public, that would like to comment at this time on any item that is not on the agenda? Anna.
Anna Sotelo, 39075 Southeast Gamma Street. Parks and Public Works Committee meeting last week. And again, I was really pleased to hear the progress about the crosswalks downtown. I'm delighted by Ben, our Public Works Director at the time. What do you call it? Subbing? What do you?
The contract's almost done.
Anyways, I'm delighted by him and the work that he's doing, so I don't want this to be taken wrong. But I was really concerned when he referred to our city's consulting engineer company, because I'm not aware that we have a contracted consulting engineer. I'm assuming that he's referring to Petit, and I just think that it's really important that we remind Ben that we're doing, what is it, RFPs? Or what are they? RFQs. Exactly. That was the last statement made in a city council meeting, was that Petit had one contract remaining, and that for future projects, we would be doing competitive bids. So I just really wanted to make sure that he's clear that we don't have a consulting contracted engineer. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this time? Wayne?
She's counting me down already. Anyhow, Wayne Russell, 8438 Meadowbrook / Wildcat Way Southeast. I almost forgot that. But anyhow, first of all, I'd like to commend Chief Flips and the city for recognizing my fellow veterans and service persons. And then on the next note, I'd like to commend our political leaders that were at the casino along with the Snoqualmie Tribe and Casino yesterday for the veterans sponsored forum they had. It was very good. And anyhow, Kim Schreier was there. She presented me with my Vietnam War veterans pin. Bill Ramos was there, Mayor Larson was there, and Mayor Herring were there. So thanks a lot for attending. I'm sure a lot of us appreciated having our leadership there. And now, on the other side of this whole deal is berms. I've been driving on the Mill Pond Road, and guess what? The knotweed leaves are gone. And guess where the water is on the berm that's breached east of the weir? It's almost up to the Mill Pond Road again. And if you remember last year, that was brought up, and that's unfortunately when I found the person that had plowed on the snowbank and passed away that evening at that council meeting. But anyhow, the Weyerhaeuser hasn't taken care of that berm, and I was really hoping somehow we'd get them to take care of it since they still own that property. Because as well, you folks had flooding here when I was over in Twist, but anyhow, you folks had flooding, and that doesn't help the situation any if you have the lake where it's going to be coming out to the road quicker. So anyhow, I'm hoping maybe Public Works or somebody can check with it, or we can get something going with Weyerhaeuser to fix that berm. The other one I'd like to see disappear, but that's been my pet peeve for many years, ever since 1990 flood. So anyhow, thanks a lot for letting me speak. And again, Mr. Mayor, thanks a lot for attending the forum yesterday. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Wayne. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak at this time? All right, seeing no one else move forward, we'll move on. We do not have a consent agenda left over tonight. I will note that No, well, 144 does not constitute a consent agenda, so that'll be pulled down under committee as well. I did want to note that our apologies for not getting the minutes in the consent agenda. As you know, Jody's been out sick for the last 2 weeks, and Tia is now taking a job in Issaquah, or in Redmond, so a few things have fallen between the cracks. So I'll just ask the various chairs of the various committees to help me plug in these agenda bills when we get there into the appropriate committees. All right, moving on to ordinances. The Finance Administration Committee, Agenda Bill 19139, ordinance certifying an increase in the general taxes for the city of Snoqualmie for the fiscal year commencing January 1st, 2020, on all property, both real and personal, in said city which is subject to taxation. The general taxes are for the purpose of paying sufficient revenue to carry on the departments of said city for the ensuing year. This is only for introduction tonight, not actions. I'll just ask the committee chair to please read the summary statement.
Okay. City of Snoqualmie requires a regular levy in the amount of $8,279,560, which requires a 1.11% increase in property tax revenue in the amount of $89,478 from the previous year in order to discharge the expected expenditures and obligations of the city of Snoqualmie. Again, just for introduction.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and queue up a presentation from Drew, and then we can open it for any conversation.
First one.
Drew learned.
Good evening, Council. My name is Drew Boutte, and I am the budget analyst for the city of Snoqualmie. Just wanted to go over some basics with you to start off with. The state of Washington uses a budget-based property tax system, and this is different from the vast majority of states that use a rate-based system. This means that cities, as a part of their budget process, must first establish the total dollar amount of property tax revenue they wish to generate for the upcoming year, subject to limitations. Once the total dollar amount is established, the county assessor will then calculate the city levy rate, the rate each property owner must pay based on the total assessed valuation of all properties in the city. Now, I mentioned limitations. The most significant limitation is the 1% annual levy limit. This restricts how much the city's legally allowable levy amount can grow each year and was enacted back basically 2007, 2008 due to concerns about property taxes rising faster than inflation. The legally allowable levy amount will not increase more than 1% or the rate of inflation each year, whichever is lower, plus an additional amount generated by new construction and other add-ons. The legally allowable levy amount represents a ceiling that the city of Snoqualmie cannot exceed. Now, council is not required to levy property taxes equal to the legally allowable levy amount. The difference between the legally allowable levy amount and the amount actually levied by council is commonly referred to as bank capacity. The city may use its bank capacity if approved by council, but can never exceed its legally allowable levy amount. So we're going to request 2 property tax actions from council, which council will need to take on November the 25th, 2019. Council will need to pass an increase ordinance that increases the 2019 levied amount by 1.11% or less. That includes 0, and you'll see that in Agenda Bill 19139. And just to confirm, the 1.11% includes the capacity that we had banked last year. Secondly, the second action council will need to take is to certify regular and excess property taxes to the King County Assessor's Office, and this is contained within Agenda Bill 19141. Administration recommends passing the increase ordinance as currently written, which includes an increase of 1.11%, and the reason for this is because it can help to address a number of council goals, helps to keep pace with the rate of inflation, and helps to tackle the structural deficit or sustainability problem between revenues and expenditures. Now, with your council goals, I have highlighted council goal number 3 and council goal number 4, and emphasize maintaining city infrastructure and providing and protecting services. Property tax revenues accrue to the general fund, and the general fund supports important maintenance such as pothole repairs and the near daily upkeep of parks and services such as police and fire. In order to sustain these services over the next year, the 1.11% is prudent. And the question is why? Well, because the city of Snoqualmie is not immune to the rising cost of goods and services. Just this year alone, this region has experienced a 3.28% increase in inflation. Imagine for a moment, the city paid for $100 in police services back in 2014 and pretend that they matched it with $100 in property tax revenues. Today, the cost of those supplies would increase to $114, while the city could only match it with roughly $105 in property tax revenue if we took the 1% annually. Also, in addition to our recommendation, there were several collective bargaining agreements that council had passed over the past couple of years that includes cost of living adjustments. For the Snoqualmie Police Association employees within that union, we'll see a 3.2% increase this year or in 2020. For the International Association of Firefighters, they will see a 3% increase cost of living adjustment. And for Teamsters, they will see a 2.5% cost of living adjustment as well. Now, administration is recommending a regular levy of $8.28 million, and this is greater than the 8.04 that we are collecting this year. And this represents a 3.1% increase over this year. You can see that the 1.11% increase equates to about $89,000. This year, we anticipate collecting about $32,000 from new construction. We also anticipate about $116,000 from state assessed utilities, and there's an issue with that I'll get into. And then in addition to that, we expect to collect $7,000 in refunds. Now, the problem with the state assessed utility value that you see there is this is just an estimate. We won't know exactly what that number is until after council certifies property taxes. So this is a high estimate. Just in case their assessed valuation increases substantially, we'll be able to capture that with our property taxes that we have, or that we're recommending.
Understand it's an estimate, but why does it jump from 1,000 to 116,000?
So I won't know exactly how much their assessed valuation is going to change until after council certifies property taxes. If I didn't plug in a high dollar value, then the likelihood is any amount that may come in from utility value would probably be banked for next year. So either we collect the money this year if they happen to be relatively high and use that to support police and fire, or we'd have to wait and come back next year in order to potentially use some of that bank capacity. Okay? In addition to the regular levy, we also have an excess levy. This dollar amount is not going to change between this year and next year. The reason we collect an excess levy is it supports the annual debt and interest payment on the fire station bond. And this bond is scheduled to mature December 1st, 2022. Some just additional important values to go over. The assessed valuation is expected to increase to $3.56 billion, which is a 2.6% change over this year. And the levy rate is expected to stay relatively the same.
I have a question on the last slide. So on the assessed value for 2020, that's really coming from 2019's valuation, correct?
So the assessed value for 2019 was $3.47 billion. The assessed valuation that you see for
Well, our taxes are based on a prior year's assessed value. Is that
they're
correct?
based on prior year's actual regular levy.
The total amount of money collected from every property in the city of Snoqualmie?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is when I went and I looked at my property today, I can see 2019 valuation, but my tax comes from, for 2019, comes from my valuation from 2018. But we don't have we don't have that factor yet for.
I think I see what you're
right.
trying. Yeah, I would say generally so. They're assessing it for this year, right? 2019 assessment would.
So I just noticed that for my
2020.
for my property, I noticed that the next year coming up, the property value was lower than it was the prior year. So it didn't go up.
Right.
That was the point I was going to make.
So there are some other properties that will see their assessed valuation increase. There are places on the ridge that might actually see a decrease. And so in total, we anticipate the assessed valuation for the city equaling 3.56 billion, but that is with fluctuations with different parcels and so on.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yes, I just want to make sure people understand how this works, because we heard in the public comment period, one commenter was completely incorrect about how this works. And I'm worried that the question we just heard reflects some of that same misunderstanding. It's very important, I think, the community understand how this works. I think you tried to hit it on one of your earlier slides about how Washington State's process is different than some other states. But if everyone's property value in Snoqualmie went down by 10%, am I not correct that everyone's property tax bill in dollar amount would still be the same as the prior year?
That is correct.
So property values moving do not cause a change in your tax bill unless something else happens.
Yeah, same thing, it could go up 10% and it doesn't change.
So if everyone's property value in Snoqualmie, if everyone's goes up 10%, they will not pay 1 penny more in property tax as a result of that. Everyone's property tax bill will be the same dollar amount. So this is something that people need to understand. So what you're proposing here is to change the dollar amount that the city actually collects.
Correct.
But if we took 0%, then regardless of whether all of the property went up in value 10%, went down in 10%, wouldn't change the fact that the city would collect the same dollar amount of taxes, correct?
Yes.
Right.
So what we're talking about is whether or not to change the dollar amount that we collect, which is not a function of whether the property values went up or down.
I would just add to complete that, maybe what's confusing to people is how would it stay the same? If the property values go down, and correct me, Drew, then the cost per thousand of property value on an individual household would go up. It would go up for everybody in order to capture the same amount of revenue.
Yes.
If the property values go up across the board 10%, the cost per thousand on each property in the city would ratchet down. That's called the millage rate or the levy rate in order to capture the same amount of revenue.
Yes.
And so if we just go back, can you just go back one slide for us? Sorry, yeah, to this slide. So if I understand correctly, what you're trying to say here about that utility value is you're just trying to make sure that we capture something there.
Right.
That if something changes with utility values, that we in fact capture it. That's all you were trying to say there.
Right beforehand, correct.
And so the point here, to the mayor's just point about the levy value or rate per thousand.
Millage rate, yeah.
The rate per thousand. The King County assessor will take the property value changes that he assesses. He'll take any percentage increase that we apply, and then he'll recalculate everyone's tax bill. So for example, if we were to do 0%, the dollar amount that everyone pays may change a little bit just because my property might have changed in value by 3%.
Yeah.
My neighbors might have changed by 4%. Between the two of us together, we're going to pay the same dollar amount, but he might pay more than I do relative to last year. We might get a little rejig between the two of us, but the city will collect the same dollar amount, right?
It's your proportional share of the totals, or of the city's total assessed valuation.
Right, so for the city to pay for those things you put up on the slide, increases in 70% of our costs are salary and or personnel and personnel-related costs.
Yep.
For us to cover these 3%, 3.2%, these raises, if we don't change anything on the property tax, we don't get any more dollars to pay for that from
Right.
property tax,
And
correct?
we keep falling further behind every year then. That's the structural deficit that you say.
Yes.
So the most we could do is 1%, which is still going to be a third of those numbers.
So
right?
council, for the sake of time, Drew's going to touch on some of these other pieces. If we could maybe let him continue through the presentation, then we'll, at this point, we'll probably be here till 10. Go ahead, Drew.
We will be. Okay. I hope I don't complicate it a little bit more. In essence, what I'm trying to show here is the potential impact to a homeowner with a certain valuation of property, for example. But this needs to, we all need to be reminded that thing that's important here is if all else remains constant. So while this might potentially increase your property taxes, also you have to take into consideration how the value of your property changes relative to the value of someone else's. So that's also influential in determining about how much property tax you would pay last year or not. I've received questions this past year, my property taxes have increased 4%, 3%, and usually the reason is primarily because of their change in assessed valuation relative to the change of the city overall.
In other words, their value went up higher than the average.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Which
So
is
even
good,
though,
which is good for them, equity, yeah.
so even though council last year may have approved a 0.5% increase, it's not just that you have to take into consideration, it's also your proportional share of the city's total assessed value. So in essence, what we're looking at here is a table of assessed values of property. If the average value of a property in Snoqualmie is $700,000, then the property owner would likely owe $17.60 if all else remains constant. And that's roughly about $1.50 monthly. Question that I often get is, where does the money go? So for every $1 that a property owner in Snoqualmie pays in taxes, roughly about 20 cents goes towards the city of Snoqualmie, and 80 cents goes to a number of other governments. Of the 20 cents that goes to the city of Snoqualmie, roughly 6 cents supports the police department, 4 cents supports the fire department, 4 cents supports administration, 3 cents supports the parks department, and 3 cents supports community development. If you were to pay $8,000 in property taxes, roughly $480 of that would support the police department, $320 of that would support the fire department, and $240 of that would support the operations and maintenance of the park system. Just to give you some idea of the scale.
Does that add up?
Did you want to ask a clarifying question, Councilor Shipp?
Yeah, does that add up? 8,000 if you add those things together?
No, because it
Because
does
the numbers
school
483,
district and
20,
everything. That's
only
just the city's
represent the
share.
20%. They're only out of the 20%.
Oh, I
or
see
the
what you're saying.
4%, 3%
Okay.
of the, yeah.
Yeah.
okay. So they're following from the prior two slides.
Right.
So he's just illustrating that it's a very small proportion of
Should
the
have to
overall bill.
1060 or so.
So I've brought up the idea that we're not the only jurisdiction that is charging property taxes over time. You've got the King County, you've got the Snoqualmie Valley School District, as well as the state of Washington and other jurisdictions as well that take a piece of your property tax pie. So increases in property taxes is not just because of the city of Snoqualmie or the past 5-year time frame. It also includes, like I said, King County, and we'll get to that. Let me get to the next slide. So between 2016 and 2017, the voters of Snoqualmie passed a levy lid lift, which supported the hiring of 2 police officers and 1 firefighter. In King County, back in 2015, voters approved the Best Start for Kids levy, which is supporting reducing the amount of adverse childhood experiences with children in our county. The Snoqualmie Valley School District, voters passed a high school bond to support the Mount Si, rebuild of the Mount Si High School.
That was
one
of the biggest hits, yeah.
Huge jump, you can see there. And then also the state as well finally resolved the McCleary decision basically back in 2017, which added a pretty significant jump in the levy rate between.
That was against school-related funding and school funding.
Correct. So looking in the more immediate future for next year, voters recently passed in August the King County Parks levy, and this will add about 5 cents to the levy rate that voters of Snoqualmie will have to pay. And then in addition to that, voters recently this last week passed the EMS replacement levy, which will also add about 5 cents to the levy rate as well. Oh, sorry, on the wrong page. And so what I've done here is I've also estimated the potential impact on a property owner here in Snoqualmie if everything else remained constant. All right? So a question that we often receive is how much in property taxes will I pay next year? My answer to everyone is it really depends, because we got to keep in mind the complexities of the property tax system. Depends on the actions of other jurisdictions, which I might not necessarily be aware of. It depends on the timely flow and sharing of information with the King County Assessor's Office. That's an ongoing activity right now. They're working hard to get in all the assessed values and things like that as well. And then in addition to that, like we've discussed, it depends on how the value of one property really changes to the value relative to the value of other properties. So what I've got here is a helpful tool that the King County Assessor's Office has put together called the Tax Transparency Tool. The goal of this tool is to help property owners navigate the complexities of the property tax system. And it really includes, for example, here that you can see in this window, how much the property owner would pay in property taxes. Any proposed tax changes that you see here are outlined. And then over here, it can tell you exactly where your property taxes are going in terms of jurisdiction. So I think it's a really helpful tool that if any property owners are concerned about what's going on, they can possibly refer to this site that the King County Assessor's Office has put together.
Great. Is that your conclusion, Drew?
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Mayhew and Councilmember Summerall.
Just a quick question, because one of the,
Actually, Jim, I'm sorry. I'm going to do round robin because you guys already spoke a few times, and I know that down at the end of the table, Councilmembers Ross or Jeans had a couple questions. Did you guys want to jump in? Or? Okay, Councilmember Ross.
Sure, I have. So you were showing several screens back that our levy basically would be, with 1.1% increase, would be 1 cent. Is that correct? So it goes right there. No?
Nope.
From, right there. So it goes from 239 this year to 240.
Correct.
Right, so we would see 1 cent levy
You would
rate.
see an increase, right, in the levy rate overall for the city of 1 cent.
Right, and that's including, I mean, we're seeing an increase in assessed value, we're seeing,
So
I guess, regular levy rate, and so it just increases 1 cent.
just want to reiterate, essentially, the levy rate is a secondary calculation that is completed by the King County Assessor's Office. What we're concerned about is how much property tax do we want to collect overall? What's the total dollar amount? So we have to keep that in mind.
Councilmember Shepherd, Sunwall, and Mayhew.
Okay, so I looked at multiplying 1.11 as it would have applied to what the value was for my home, and looking at the difference between what it was the prior year, and I came up with $6 from between the tax year 2018 to 2019 for 0.5%. If I multiply that time to get to 1.11, that would bring me up to $147 increase if we'd done that last year. So as far as the increase of 1.11%, it sounds very small, but it ends up being more money than people realize as far as individual taxes that are being paid.
So to try to address that question that you had, just to establish a set of common facts. So the amount of increase that you experienced last year or this year was $66, correct?
Correct.
All right. And in essence, what you're doing is saying that if you're going to multiply the 0.5% by 2.2, that would get you roughly 1.11%. Is that correct?
Sounds right, yeah.
Okay. So then what you're saying is if you multiply your $66 by
Actually, is it
2.2,
okay.
you would get to 147, right?
Right.
So the problem in the fallacy that I see, is the belief that the 0.5% equates to $66. Okay? It doesn't, because your assessed valuation increased greater than the overall city's assessed valuation.
Right.
So really, if it was 1.11% last year, you would have been paying $77 and not $66 like you did. So really, of the $66 that you paid, roughly about $5 of that was tied to the 0.5%. Most of it was driven by your change of assessed valuation greater than the city's overall assessed valuation.
Well, that's the thing, is you can't tell across all properties. You don't have that data.
I know, yeah.
So the translation, though, by property can be quite variable.
Yeah.
And that's the point. I'm not saying that everyone's will change that significantly, but we do have some properties that fall off as
Mhm.
far as not paying into the pool of money. And I think that when we start to bring in these variables,
Yeah.
it basically, we have to make up the difference. And so that's why I think it's important to understand property by property, how it actually looks.
So the difficulty is I can't deal with that. That's something for the King County Assessor's Office, right? To
Right.
try to answer those questions.
I know, I'm not asking a question, I'm just making a point that it sounds like a penny.
Right.
But it's not a penny, it's a difference of $147 for one property.
We'll get there. Councilmember Sunwall.
So,
Just going to leave that there? You're just going to leave that false statement hanging?
You're gonna get it.
Okay.
I think Drew did.
I kind of want to skip my comment just to get to that answer. That's going to be awesome. So I'll try and be brief. So I just want to I have a comment and then a quick question. So it looks like for $1,040 a year for someone who pays $8,000 in property taxes, I get unlimited police, fire, parks, and operations in my city. Did I have
Well,
that right?
you get a level of service, right?
That's
So
about
the level of
$85
service
a
that-
month? So I'm just trying to compare that to my ROA bill. Okay, that seems like a good value. That was my comment. Now, my question is, sorry, Amy. So my question is 1.1, so maybe I don't understand banking, like the banking, not that banking. So last year, we elected to take 0.5% instead of 1%, correct?
Yes.
So I thought that would mean this year, we could take up to 1.5,
Yeah.
not 1.11. So
I thought the same.
to be totally honest with you, that would have changed my opinion last year. So help me understand what that banking means and why we don't get 1.5 and why it's 1.11.
So the difficulty, and I would refer to the King County Assessor's Levy Worksheet, which we have also attached to
So that's not gonna
the
happen,
agenda
so just-
bill. Basically, note number 5 says, administrative refunds under RCW 8469020 were removed from the levy lid, i.e. the legally allowable levy by the 1981 legislature.
So these defaults on property
So what am I,
tax?
well, they're administrative refunds, so there's something that the King County Assessor's Office may have done wrong or something like that accrues to us. So when we're multiplying the percentage increase, we're multiplying that against the actual regular levy, which includes refunds. But then when they're calculating the legally allowable levy amount, they're subtracting out refunds. So we actually received a pretty substantial refund of about $26,000 back in 2018, which we then multiplied the 0.5% against, but then that was subsequently removed from the legally allowable levy.
I am so glad I asked.
So as a result, that difference is actually less.
So we got the money one way or the other through refunds or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so therefore we have to back that out of what we're now able to take.
Right, sure, yeah.
All right.
All right, Jim.
Councilmember Mayhew. I should be asking Councilmember Holloway, he's the only one that hasn't spoken, but Brian, seems to be like you lean in and. All right. So many things to talk about.
So many things to talk about. Just one thing I wanted to clear up, because one of the speakers during the public hearing portion mentioned a concern about public hearing happening before some of the information, such as we just received, is available. And I just wanted to confirm that there is another public hearing on the same topic at our next council meeting as well. Is that correct?
You know, I'm not sure if it's correct or not, but I think it's irrelevant because when the agenda bills come forward for a vote, I'm going to provide opportunity for public comment prior to.
So we will
council
absolutely
action.
be hearing from the public again on this. And so
Through
just
a
want to
public
make
hearing
sure.
or through public comment time.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that that was understood, that we're going to hear that public comment and want to hear it. So And then the second thing is, could you just take us back to your chart that shows if we do this 1.1%, you had I think a chart with an average, yeah, that one. So, so we can do between 0% and the maximum is 1.1%.
Correct.
This chart shows us the maximum, is that correct?
That is correct.
Are we on the wrong chart?
No, this shows the maximum.
This is the 1.1%.
All right.
I just think there's some terminology that's floating around here. Drew's trying to say that the amount actually equates to 1.1%. You're taking 1.5%. I know it gets confusing.
No.
It's not.
All right. You guys need a sidebar?
Well, it's the 0.5 minus the prior year refund he was discussing
Correct.
that the
Correct.
state said, thank you very much.
Correct.
Correct, Drew?
Well, so if you were to take a look at the King County Assessor's
Drew into the microphone, please.
levy worksheet, there's a specific section for the increase ordinance that says 1.11% and how much that equates to. The amount that we can actually collect, right, from the 1% plus the bank capacity is 1.11%, and that will take us to our maximum allowable levy, the legal allowable levy. Okay? So there is no greater percentage than 1.11%.
Okay, so let me see if I can ask the question and not cause everyone to go on tilt, because I asked it poorly. The maximum increase, the minimum increase we can do is 0%.
Yes.
The maximum increase we can do is 1.1%? Okay, hearing no objection, which would be 89,000 in total for the whole city. 89,000. That's what we would add to the city budget. Is that correct?
Well, in addition to that, so it's not just the 89,000, you also have to factor in the value of new construction.
No, but our change of 0% or 1.1% wouldn't cause new construction to
No,
go
it
one way or
wouldn't.
the other. So
Correct. Those are
the action
add-ons.
that we are taking is back to the other chart, right?
Yes.
I know we're not taking this action tonight, but that action we're contemplating, the most we could take is 1.1%, and we could take any amount in between,
Correct. That is the increase ordinance, yes.
okay? And so the average home in Snoqualmie, you said was 750?
$700,000.
700,000. So then that would be $17.60 per house for the year.
Correct.
And if some house, like we heard in the example earlier, paid a lot more than $17, if one house paid $147, I think is the amount I heard, then other houses would pay the equivalent of $147 less.
Right.
And the city would only get, on average, $17.60 per home, or to put it another way, we would get 89,000, period.
Correct.
At the maximum, or whatever other dollar amount we set if we do something less than the maximum. So if someone gets hit worse, others get hit less, and that's because their relative value change. That's it.
Balances out, yes.
Okay,
Well, and the
thanks.
good news for the person getting hit more is they just realized a considerable amount of equity in their home that they're paying a relatively small amount of taxes on.
But isn't it just, I just want to make clear, because the speaker earlier, who saw their house have an increase in assessed value, may in fact have a lower tax bill,
Yeah, right.
because until they check how their house value changed compared to the rest of Snoqualmie, they don't know if that caused their tax to go up or maybe even down.
Right.
Okay.
If it was lower than the relative increase across the averages, they would actually see a slight decrease in their taxes. Councilmember Shepherd.
So there's more variables than just a set of homes. There's also the houses that do not pay into property taxes, like the Salish Lodge.
Those aren't houses.
Well, the property factors into the computation.
Clarification, the Salish Lodge does not pay property tax?
Because it's owned by,
Because the House Bill 1287, the bill that we fought, won in Superior Court, is
Bill.
overturned, that where tribes can
That's not
apply for
factored into
property
this.
tax exemptions for properties owned off of reservations.
Correct. But we
So
have-
this
we have
actually has
ability-
It
nothing.
has nothing to do.
with this.
Point of
it has
order.
Nothing to do with this.
This has nothing,
Yeah.
the sales has nothing to do with what we're talking about
It's an
tonight.
entirely different tax issue or law, not relative to this issue at all.
Point of order.
Yeah, it doesn't, go ahead.
Okay, so I do think that this does compute into what we
Point
do
of order.
pay.
Yeah.
As I said before, you did not acknowledge my point of order.
I've s-
What she's talking about
just-
has nothing to do with the 89,000. It's been this way for years and years and years.
Right.
It has nothing to do with whether we're going to do 1.1 or 0.
Objection is sustained. We're going to move on. Councilmember Holloway.
Okay, can you go up a slide? One more? One more? Right there. Okay, as Councilmember Mayhew said, or tried to point out, new construction utility value refund are not council controllable. That is not really the decision you're being asked to make tonight, or tomorrow, or next week, in 2 weeks. Okay? The decision that this council has to make is, are we gonna take $89,000 additional real estate tax from the community of Snoqualmie, above and beyond what we already do? I will point out, year to year, we now currently have a surplus that we're talking about moving to something else.
An operational surplus?
We have a surplus in the general fund that we are considering setting aside for the community center.
Capital.
Capital.
We're gonna look at general fund.
Okay.
Not on, from one-time revenues, not from ongoing operational money.
Piece.
I'm not aware
I will
I'm not
also-
aware of an ongoing, sorry, go ahead.
May I continue? I will also point out that this is not the sole source of revenue for the city of Snoqualmie. And as you saw on the other chart, citizens of Snoqualmie have taken some pretty significant hits for good reasons, mostly school, in this particular area. So there's consideration of changing the mix by the judgment we make here, and also how are we balancing this, and can we provide some relief for money that has been directed to other good things outside of our control? I'll leave it at that, because tonight's just discussion. Back to you, Chair.
Councilmember Ross.
So this is totally off of this. The legislature had made some major changes this past year for senior citizens, disabled persons, and veterans exemptions and deferral programs. And so there's different income limits that you can look at that if you need assistance with your property tax or deferring them, that there's some new options. And so you can look, there should be more information coming out, and I would suggest that the city sends information out because it's to the benefit for our senior citizens.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mayhew.
So I'm just curious, Mayor, and I don't know who to direct this to, but has Snoqualmie done all that we're able to do to assist seniors, veterans, low income, any other groups that the state allows us to target to provide benefits in property tax relief? Have we taken advantage of all of the programs that we're able to take advantage of, or is it possible that there are some, and I don't know the answer to the question, I'm not leading you towards anything, but are there any programs that we could look at as a council that might assist some of those, particularly those communities who are on fixed incomes and struggle to deal with tax increases of any amount?
Drew, do you want to field that, or Robert, or?
So I don't think I have enough information I'd have to go back and do some research just to see what we've done in the past for the most part in terms of answering that question. So I can certainly
I
look
think that'd be
into that.
nice to hear at a future meeting, because I think if there are things that we could look at, I think that the council would like to look at those things.
Just having worked in county government in the past, I can say most of it falls on the county level. What we do here is what we can control. So utility rate relief is a good thing where we have the low income program per ordinance. Yeah, we really try to work with them and reach out to people that are saying, hey, we're having problems with their bills, and all the time we try to make arrangements with that. That's what we can control. If the council would wish, we could do some research on this for them. But again, it would be on the county level. We can see if there's any exemptions to that might apply to cities.
Well,
Yeah,
I
and
don't know
as
the
far
rest
as
of
I'm
council,
aware-
but I'd love to hear, hear about if there are programs, if there are any other programs that we could take some action on. I'd love to hear about it.
I mean, as far as I know, it's been a standard practice for years that if we are contacted by senior citizens or those on a fixed income, and that we do direct them to King County for those resources for applying for an exemption or deferrals.
I mean, every so often there's bills in the legislature, so that's something we can look at, maybe contact one of the state representatives' office to see if there's anything being worked at or studied during the interim for the legislature coming up here.
So is that something we could hear back on, or do you need the council to ask
Yeah,
for it
Robert, if we
formally?
could
Or
bring some information back next
Well, question on that, though. I mean, take the case in point here. If for some reason half the city were to qualify for zero taxes in this, it wouldn't change the levy. That levy would just spread.
Right.
Okay, so if half the city got on one of these programs and had to pay no taxes, the other half of the city would see their tax double.
Well, we're not sure about that program. It just depends on the program. I don't know what program we're talking about, so I couldn't tell you.
I'm not sure it has a material effect on the 89,000.
Yeah, but it's not being sure, which I'm trying to address.
Yeah.
Let's be sure. Let's find out.
Yep, we'll bring back more.
I think it goes back to the premise the council was mentioning earlier about, and Drew mentioned it, about some homeowners are in areas where their appraisal is going to go up possibly, some are going to go down. It's not equal. And in this city, it's very unequal because you have such a wide diversity of housing stock and areas. And we have some neighborhoods that are hot that might see more turnover, more activity than other areas that are more stagnant. And it's not just Ridge versus city, it's like my neighborhood on the Ridge versus Eagle's Nest or something else. I mean, it just depends street by street sometimes. So it's very hard to do a one-size-fits-all with this type of community because we do have a huge housing mix here.
Yeah, no, I think I'm being misunderstood. I'm just asking if is there anything
We're going to
we
bring
can
back
do?
more information on that,
Let's
if I could,
look
just
at
for the
it.
sake of time.
That's all.
I thought I'd answered that about 3 times already. We're going to bring back more information, so let's move on. All right, Councilmember Jeans.
So there's more than one citizen out there, when they focus on what we're considering, saying taxes, we pay too much taxes. You can't raise taxes anymore. And we say to them, and the taxes for the city are primarily salary for the employees. And the citizen will say, well, then you're paying too much for your employees. And then we can properly say to them, we have negotiated contracts with the fire, with the police, with the other union. And these are highly long-term negotiated contracts involving a multitude of issues. And yes, we can hold the line over the course of time on those union contracts, but the likelihood is a cop or a fireman will say, well, hell, I'll go somewhere else, as well as key employees. And you can say, well, you've got, you're at the executive level, you're paying too much, you just cut those people. And I guess we can consider those kinds of things. But I'd like to have someone from the staff comment on the fact that these union contracts are, we have to negotiate those. We have to have professionals at all levels with the city, and these are almost matters of course, that we have control over. We have input, but we have to reach a reasonable compromise to keep the kinds of staff, professional staff, that we can do those kinds of things that we expect them to do. We expect policemen to do good police work, and if we don't get that, then we say, well, what the hell kind of city are you running here? So somebody comment on those union contracts that we negotiate, not all at the same time, but and for various lengths of time?
Well, I would most prefer, this would be a great question to lob to our city administrator, Bob Larson, since he's involved in those. But I guess I would just state, Bob, as you know, or Councilmember Jeans, these all reflect the values of our community and the council trying to best discern what is the fundamental values of the community. It's about service levels. You're right. I mean, when you're challenged on costs, you have three tools you can use. You can either increase your fees and taxes to stay up with those costs. You can decrease service levels, which means lower your compensation and benefit packages, or you can do some economic development. So pick and choose. You can't magically address those things without one of those three or a combination of all three. This council, I think, has chosen and has given direction to my administration pretty consistently over the last several years, as you recall, to say, keep us competitive or slightly north of competitive with other cities as we do comps on other benefit and pay packages so that we attract solid, good, strong personnel to service this community. And as we have surveyed this community time and again over the years, the consistent response we get from the vast majority of citizens is we want to maintain the service levels that we enjoy that are central to the quality of life that residents enjoy here. So if the council feels that value is shifted, those are certainly tools and things to consider, but you shouldn't fool yourselves to think if you don't keep incrementally up with those costs that eventually that will get you into a hole where we will be challenged to be competitive, and we will, as you very eloquently described, begin to lose good staff to other communities that will be willing to pay more in both compensation and packages. So.
And I just wanted to add some context to the mayor's comments as well. If you remember to our budget discussions last year, we have a narrower base of revenue than our neighbors, even North Bend, especially Issaquah. If you're comparing us to Issaquah, Issaquah has sales tax as their number 2 revenue source. We don't have Fred Meyer here. We don't have Target. We don't have big box stores. We don't have high-end retail. So property tax ends up being 8.28 million.
Or to put that in the context of what I just said, again, the 3 buckets, what those communities rely heavily on is economic development. They heavily invest in Issaquah, as you know, has kind of grown a massive retail presence over the last decade or two. North Bend with the outlet mall and so forth. So again, those are community values. Do we want to go heavily into economic development as one tool or spread that more around?
And so that's why the property tax discussion becomes more critical for us than maybe some of our neighbors per se, because we have utility taxes number 2, but if you think of sales tax, our ongoing sales tax revenue averages about 1.8 to 1.9 million a year. So it's just a fraction of the 8.28 we get from property tax.
All right. Council, just for the sake of time, it's a great conversation. I'm sure it will continue in 2 weeks. And you certainly had committee meetings for the sake of time, otherwise we're going to be heading to a 10 o'clock or over 10 o'clock meeting. Maybe this is a good time to wrap it up for tonight and we can continue to move on, if that's okay. The next ordinance is related, so I'm not sure we have to repeat the conversation, but I really feel bad, and my apologies to our friends of Mountains to Sound Greenway have been patiently waiting around. I think at this point, rather than even taking the time to read the
Mayor,
agenda.
point of order.
Yes,
Can we
sir.
just, there's just so much noise. I'm having a hard time focusing at all. Can we just have conversations in the audience taken out into the hallway?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Okay. Sure. I'll try to note that more carefully. So let me see. I want to jump down to under Community Development Committee, Agenda Bill 103, so we can let our Greenway representative get out of here if she'd like to go back and enjoy what's left of her evening. Agenda Bill 19103, Contract for Services Agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and the Mountain Sound Greenway Trust.
Move to authorize the completion of deliverables for the Snoqualmie Valley Trail Map Element 1, Art and Culture Brochure Element 2, using additional funds that will be unused for local business training Element 6, Heritage I've lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. Move to authorize the completion of deliverables for the Snoqualmie Valley Trail Map, Element 1, Art and Culture Brochure, Element 2, using additional funds that will be unused for local business training, Element 6, Heritage Display Boards, Element 3, and Marketing and Promotion, Element 4, under the contract for services with Mountains to Sound Greenway Trust by December 1st, 2019, by amending the scope of work under the contract to specify those deliverables above, amend Section 2.01 of the contract to change the end date to December 1st, 2019, amend Section 3.01 of the contract to change the not-to-exceed amount to $14,625, amend Section 4.01 of the contract to change the final billing date to December 8th, 2019, and authorize the mayor to sign a revised contract if determined necessary by the city attorney. May I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19103 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Anna?
Hotel 39075 Southeast Gamma Street. I'm just really confused how this just keeps coming back on agenda items and nothing really of substance really gets presented. At the CDC meeting, nothing was presented. It was supposed to be presented here. The reason you guys keep throwing it back is because nothing's been presented by the whole Savor Snoqualmie. And I think there's a big disconnect. And I want to go, Drew was just talking about goals. I want to talk about goal number 1. And again, these are the kind of things that every year, I think it's been 2 years now that I've been talking to you about Savor Snoqualmie and how it's not really being productive for the goal number 1. And I think that once you guys really accept that and acknowledge that, and again, what's this urgency? A month ago, there wasn't, now all of a sudden there's a sudden urgency. They said that they already paid for all promotions, but now it's all going to come back again that authorizing before the end of the year, but nothing was presented. There was no presentation at CDC, and right now, there's been no presentation. And I'm very concerned at these kind of relationships between so like when I go in and Google Snoqualmie and have a good day at Snoqualmie and Doer Snoqualmie, Savor Snoqualmie doesn't come up. It doesn't come up at the top. It never comes up. And it's also the whole Snoqualmie Valley. So again, I think to avoid these kind of property taxes increases, let's get more educated and knowledgeable on how to improve people coming here and capturing the audience coming here. I'm also really concerned because I don't see these signs. I think the signs were taken off the contract, and I would really question every single one of you council members. Do you really know what this grant is? Do you really know what we get for our money? Do you know what's changed over the last few years? And what is this quick push, sudden urgency that we must get this done when you push it back? Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Is there anyone else who would like to comment at this time? All right, seeing no one else, council, is there any discussion or questions? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Holloway.
I guess I got a question on element 3, heritage boards. So this is action to approve that, commencing on that deliverable, yet the attachment memo shows that as 100% fully completed. I'm confused at, can somebody speak to that?
So the recommendation here is written to to essentially ask the council to say which items would the council.
Can you speak up, please?
Or lean down.
Is this on? Yeah, I'll use this, though I can stand up. The recommendation is written to, so that the council can weigh in on exactly what you would like to see completed, if any, from this. And so it's written for 1 through 4, not 5, and then 6 can't happen. There's not enough time, and then 7 has been completed by city staff. We recognize that 3 is already 100% expended, and that's if you will, a separate issue, but we're looking for the council's direction here. What elements do you want to see?
Does or does not the agenda bill mention item number 3 as being basically funded by this action.
Yes.
And the memo, contract for service Mountain Sound Greenway Valley, shows item number 3 as 100% complete as of November 12th, 2019. You can pull up that first
Yes,
agenda.
it says that. If you pull up the council memo, revised. Bottom of the first page.
So was number 3,
Yeah, right there.
was number 3 authorized by prior action?
It was authorized by the council when you originally approved the contract in August. And then there was the couple-week gap. So that during that time, the contract was signed and Mounds to Sound went to work on some items. And then the council reconsidered its action and Mounds to Sound voluntarily stopped at that point. But in that intervening little bit of time, some things were complete. That's why you see in the agenda bill, it says, for example, the heritage display boards are 100% complete. The marketing and promotion is 50% complete. The locals guide is 25% complete.
So
Councilmember Ross.
is recommendation then to do all the items that you listed? I know you said we could pick and choose, but does funding cover all those different items that we listed?
The recommendation is to do 1 through 4, not do 5, not do 6, and 7 is done. And 7 is done by city staff. So Mounds to Sound would not be doing that element.
And that's a staff recommendation?
Yes.
Did
Councilman
the-
Shepherd.
Oh, sorry.
Where are the heritage display boards located?
You have them, or? Go ahead.
Margaret Ullman Hess with Mountains of Sound Greenway, and I facilitate the Save Snoqualmie Valley effort. The heritage display boards were gifted to each of the heritage societies throughout the Snoqualmie Valley and are displayed at events or at the museums that they have them at. So there are actually 2 at the Northwest Railway Museum. There's one at Told Historical Society in Carnation, one up in Duval, and they've been making the rounds ever since we produced them at the end of August.
Oh, so they're not permanent, then they're,
It's a pop-up display sign about 5 feet tall, and so it means that they're easy to transport to any community event. The idea was that at Railroad Days in Snoqualmie, if the local historical society was doing a booth and they wanted to give the public some education about, well, where are some historical photo ops? Where are other places to go visit to learn about the history of the Snoqualmie, city of Snoqualmie, or the communities around, that it'd be a really easy, attractive thing they could bring with them to attract more attention. They've had a challenge in the past with community members not really being drawn to those tables or not engaging with those tables or with the museums. And this was a really attractive way to kind of bring people in and get them excited about their heritage.
thank you.
Councilmember Summerall.
So from what I can tell, I added up all those 1 through 7s, and it came out to the 20,500. But we've already talked about how 4,000 of that 20,000 was done outside of these funds by city staff. And we've talked about how 3,000 of those funds are tied up in heritage display boards that have already been completed. I'm also noticing that the total contribution of the city is 6,500, right? So of this 20 some odd $1,000, 13 of it's coming from the port. And 65, although that only adds, okay, there's the in-kind. So, and then 65 is out of city funds, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess I'm having a hard time understanding how what we're approving is for 20,000, a partnership that totals $20,500, for which 4,000 plus 3,000 is already done. Right?
What Mounds to Sound the not to exceed amount of 14,625 covers elements 1 through 4, and it covers 25% of the locals guide work, which has already been complete. The additional 3,000 on top of that to get you to a total expenditure under the budget section of 17,625 is the $3,000 that city staff has, if you will, spent. And so that's where you get the total appropriation. What you remove from the 19.5 cash amount, if you will, is what you would not expend on locals guide.
And those monies were spent per council's prior action in August. And all this got revisited because one business owner for a business that's no longer in business raised a question about the best of program. So, Councilmember Mayhew.
Well, I disagree with that characterization of why this was revisited. When was the contract signed?
I'll look at the dates, hold on. Let's see, I see August 26th for the city and September 2nd for Mountains to Sound.
So, the work we just heard a few minutes ago that was all performed by the end of August was performed prior to the contract being executed. Since the
don't have that
contract wasn't
answer, guys.
executed till both parties signed it.
Mark Hoffman, Community Development Director. We were hoping to not have that conversation tonight, but if we are, some of the work was performed prior to the signature date by Mountains to Sound. That's because this port grant and this program have been matched in prior years. And so if the conversation is going to how much was performed and when, and what's due under the signed contract, that's a different one than the recommendation that staff's making. This arose out of a tourism guide item by prior council action. Staff's recommendation is to address that issue, plus those other things that can't be done by the new deadline. If the council feels differently, that's a whole different discussion about contracts and what's due and when things were performed. Our worry is that Mountains to Sound is a key partner, as is the port. The majority of this money is from the port grant, highly successful program, and we wouldn't want to jeopardize future years. But if you want to have that detailed analysis tonight, we can.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So I know that one of the reasons we're looking at this again is because they had the best of included in what they normally do. And I don't know what the result is as far as, are we at the point where some businesses are featured and some are not, or how is that playing out now?
The two initial staff contacts for Mountains to Sound in the city are no longer employed here. They've gone elsewhere. So the key was that this issue first originated between one business owner and the initial year. Over time, that's gravitated to the fact that a voting or preference was shown at all. And so it's evolved over the last 3 years, but it's been a successful program overall. The locals guide, as you see, has been printed, so it exists. It's been on the website that you've seen, so it exists. It existed at the time of the signing of the contract. It exists now. Tonight's action, as recommended, would eliminate that from the port grant money and the city money, and we would not perpetuate it as we went forward after the council's motion, I believe, in September 9th.
Councilmember Sunwell.
Stay there, Mark. You're not done. So what would happen if we didn't approve this tonight or ever?
That's where the city attorney comes in. They have a signed contract. From my understanding, the motion by the council was not to rescind the contract. The fine detail is the contract in place? We didn't have to define that because Mountains to Sound voluntarily stopped the work on this because of the feelings about the locals guide. So it's kind of in limbo. But if we go into a discussion about whether the contract's valid, it's the wording of the motion that worries me most. It wasn't rescinded, it wasn't canceled. In theory, it's technically still there. And there are provisions in that contract about compensation, the process as far as written notice.
Early termination?
Yeah. So, but we haven't gotten into the details of that because Mountains to Sound of the city are trying to work it out, save the elements of the port grant and Savor Snoqualmie for this calendar year that the council would like to see happen. Not do the locals guide, which was the primary issue, but because of timing and the deadline at the port grant that was extended 30 days to December 1st, 6 and 7 are no longer viable either. So it makes no sense for a motion tonight that includes 6 or 7.
Councilmember Holloway and Councilmember Mayhew.
So what would be the, so we have another council meeting before December 1st. What would be the impact of tabling this until next council meeting?
The port's given us a 30-day extension to December 1st. It's fairly firm. We're just one city that takes advantage of the port grant. Literally on the 25th, whatever action that you would take would need to be reported back to the port on December 1st, a week later. The way we have it written tonight, with the expectations of how much time remains on items 1 through 4, those could be completed by December 1st. Our fear is that if you wait till December or November 25th, a majority of these can't be done, in which case why would we be discussing it at all? We would just move to a conversation on what work was performed, what's owed to Mountains of Sound under the contract, and is the contract still valid? Tonight we have time to complete items 1 through 4. On the 25th, I don't think that is the case anymore.
Councilmember Mayhew.
All right, there's a bunch of things in this that have me really troubled and frustrated, but I'm going to try and focus on where we can go from here. So as I understand it, what I thought I heard previously was that the locals guide, so let me back up. My understanding of this council's concern has to do with the locals guide, none of the other elements. And my understanding of our concern was that the locals guide ended up, we weren't concerned, contrary to what this memo says, we weren't concerned that it had a public voting element. So I don't know why this has been written. What we were concerned about was that some businesses might end up being promoted in favor of other businesses. We might be picking winners and losers with tax dollars. I thought that was our concern.
With the best of program, as I mentioned earlier.
What's that?
With the best of program they were
Yeah,
doing.
with the best, right, the best of, which I believe is part of the locals guide, and maybe I'm wrong. So I thought that's where the concern was, and so it was my thinking coming into tonight that if, sorry, and then the other thing that I thought I heard was that that the organization we're contracting with had gone ahead and done that. So they were not looking for money from us at all. They already funded that in other ways. So my understanding is that what we would be looking at tonight is those elements that we could still complete, and that we might go ahead and fund those elements but exclude the locals guide, which therefore excludes the area that the council had concern. That seemed like a reasonable approach to me, but that doesn't seem to be what we're actually talking about doing. We seem to be still talking about making payments to the locals guide, and that's where I'm hung up. So maybe if that could be cleared up. If what we're talking about is moving forward with things other than the locals guide, that seems to me to be something that this council's never objected to, in fact, previously was in favor of.
That's the base of our recommendation. If all we achieve tonight is the council lets items 1 through 4 go forward, they can be completed by the December 1st deadline, and we would appreciate that, as would Mountains of Sound. The locals guide is a little bit more unclear because they have begun to expend on it before they're voluntarily suspended the work on it. So there has been an expenditure. The discussion hasn't taken place as to who's responsible for that. Either way, the way it's set up now, that $2,500 that you see as already expended for 25% of the locals guide could be part of your motion tonight because the contract was approved based on prior years. And we may have jumped the gun with the assumption that, yeah, we're going forward. What about next year in relation to the signature on the contract? But the fact is 25% is out there. So if the question is who's responsible for that, Mountains of Sound, because they proactively started down that track, or us, the recommendation as written tonight is us.
Well, for what it's worth, I can't support that.
But it is one of those options. So if you look at the recommendation as written, it's several steps. We would very much like 1 through 4 to go forward. We could leave the question about the 25%, the local's guide to the council was discussed at CD committee, and the possibility of it being paid out of other non-tax funds, for instance. But as of this moment, Mountains to Sound would like it to be paid from the port grant.
So, Mark, if I understand that the only source of contention involves a piece that's $2,500?
If you look at 6 as being not achievable by the 1st, we would not expend that $1,250. If you look at 7 as being done by staff with other funds, that's correct. But there's also another twist that Jason can tell you about redirecting to number 2, which would cloud the basic issue tonight, but it's an opportunity for I believe, the art and culture brochure.
So two clarifications, and you're correct, Councilmember Mayhew, there is money for the locals guide as part of that budget line. It's $625, which is 25% of $2,500. If you'd like that removed, you can certainly amend the amount, and we can have that discussion separately later.
Although what I'm hearing is we're contractually bound to pay it regardless.
Well, as Mark has been saying, that's a discussion that we, the city administration, have not gone all the way through with Mountains to Sound yet, because we've been waiting to figure out what to do with everything else. So that is something we could set aside for the moment if that's what the council chooses to do. Moving on to the second thing that Mark was talking about, number 6, the local business training cannot be accomplished. It would take months to set up. So what the agenda bill proposes is to shift that $1,250 up to item number 2, the art and culture brochure. The reason is that originally there were efficiencies of scale for Mountains to Sound in printing the art and culture brochure. They were using some City of Duval port grant funds, as well as City of Snoqualmie. Mountains to Sound went ahead and printed, did one run using those Duval port funds and some of Mountains to Sound's own funds. $1,000 doesn't buy you very much for printing because they've lost that economy of scale, but adding the $1,250 back in would let them achieve that as originally intended. So we would still expend money, maybe not, and get that item out.
Councilmember Holloway.
Okay, so I got to go through history here. So we originally had a contract, and we just said pull back, and we have agreement from Mountain to Sound that when we said pull back, they said we'll stop. Okay? I assume that is in an email or something somewhere.
The voluntary cessation of work is in an email. The motion and the exact wording of it is on the council tape, and that's the biggest concern. I originally thought it was rescind the contract as a motion, but based on the exact words, and I believe they're in Jason's memo, it kind of went halfway. It didn't rescind the contract, so it's more of a legal issue that the contract's still valid. They voluntarily stopped working on it to work with us as their partner. And so that's why we haven't had the conversation about the provisions.
I'm trying to construct the life of this contract.
Okay.
Okay, so there was a contract, we said, they agreed to rescind. We're at that point, however, work in, contrary to the rescind statement, work continued on the Heritage Board display, the marketing promotional material, and the locals guide.
No work, apparently no work occurred after September 9th.
So the Heritage display boards are 100% complete.
Yes,
The marketing promotion material number 4 is 50% complete.
correct.
And the local guide is 25% complete.
More detail.
Yeah, Margaret with the Greenway again. The agreement was stated is entered into as of the 1st of August, even though it was signed by the city by the mayor on the 26th and the Greenway in early September. We were able to count work done during the month of August, and so that's how we were able to accomplish some work rather than just that week and a half window in there between the signature and the rescinding. We were able to count back work done in the month of August as well, because we knew that the agreement was going to be going that far back.
Work on item 3, 4, and 5 were done in that month prior to the agreement on rescind.
Exactly. We have not done any work on the agreement
Now,
since.
I'm a little kosher. Okay, go ahead.
Just 2 points to clarify. Remember that prior to August, in July, the council approved a grant agreement with the Port of Seattle that's supplying the funds for this. And that grant agreement said that the city intended to subcontract with Mountains to Sound Greenway to perform the work under the grant agreement.
Ongoing work.
So it wasn't just somebody said, hey, let's get out ahead of the council's August approval of the Mountains to Sound contract. There was a initial step that involved a contract that spoke to this arrangement coming forward, and the council approved the grant money. Second point, just for clarification, the motion, and I went back and watched and listened to the council's meeting, was not a motion to rescind the contract. It was a motion to reconsider the council's prior approval and to send the matter back to the committee for reconsideration. And we had a conversation at the dais that it was not a motion to terminate the contract, that the committee was going to make a recommendation about going forward. So pursuant to that motion, then staff followed up with the Mountains to Sound Greenway, and they said, okay, we'll stop. But at that point, there wasn't any direction on rescind or not rescind.
Okay.
It was essentially
There was agreement to suspend
to
activity.
suspend. That's, I
Okay, so
think that's
I'm just
probably
looking to see what my legal obligations are here, and I think at a minimum, we're legally obligated for the work that was done between contract signature and agreement to suspend, which I believe is the item 3, 50% of marketing promotion and 25% of the local guide. I don't think we can, in clear conscience, go out tonight without at least putting those funds forward. Now, my question that you mentioned, the grant, what is our legal commitment in regards to the grant? Am I committed to fully fund the matching material on the grant?
I'm trying to pull it up right now while we speak. We were working with the Mountains to Sound contract only. Thank you. I've got it
3,000, 2,000,
from the-
5,000. Yeah, so I've got about 6,500 that I think we are legally bound as work accomplished between contract signed and agreement to suspend, that we are legally bound to pay.
That's our total contribution anyway.
Huh?
That's our total contribution anyway.
Right.
The way the port grant is written, and the city attorney will be, of course, the word on how that can get interpreted, but the port agreement has a table that lays out the different projects and what funds are being allocated to each. So I can tell you what those are, but I wouldn't necessarily want to say that's how exactly the money gets allocated when the final accounting is done. So for example, I'll pick on the locals guide again. That money, the 2,500, was coming out of port funds entirely, all 2,500. For a counterexample, the heritage display boards were city funds in the port grant.
Councilmember Ross, Councilmember Jeans.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is approve basically the $13,000 that the port is going to be spending for items such as Snoqualmie Valley Trail Map. Now, I don't see any issue with that. Art and culture brochure, heritage display boards, marketing promotion. If we have an issue with the local guide, which is the best of, that's fine. But why wouldn't we want these other promotional things that they're working on? I don't see the issue here.
Councilmember Jeans.
We need good partners, and the Port of Seattle and the Mountains to Sound Greenway are good partners, and we should promote working with them more efficiently in the future than we have done in this circumstance. If we ever get around to a vote, I'm going to vote for this because I think we ought not to belabor the matter that it is essentially incurred expenses, and we're just doing the paperwork to move on. And we ought to do a better job of when this comes up next year, especially when it comes to the guide for people who are looking for guidance. That's all I have.
I'll let City Attorney follow up on the question.
Or just to answer the question that was asked previously, the grant agreement with the port does like the city's agreement with Mountains to Sound, has a 30-day termination for convenience provision in it. So maybe terminated on 30 days written notice to the port, the grant agreement, for any work that the agency, that's the city, has completed, or its subcontractor has completed by the written notice of termination, then the port's obligated to pay the grant funds for the completed work. So, but the council is not obligated under this agreement to continue with the work and receiving the grant money if the council chose not to continue with the port agreement, but.
Councilmember Sunwell.
A vote of yes on this means what?
If you vote yes on the motion that's on the floor, you would spend $17,625 in total.
6,500, which is of the city of Snoqualmie dollars.
Approximately, I'm looking at the city allocation. Let's see.
It's in there pretty, not approximately, 6,500 from the city in matching funds.
In matching funds, so that's a proportion
Take-
to the funds from the port.
The total amount is 20,500. So 6,500 plus 1,300 plus 1,000 in kind.
Right.
13,000 port, 6,500 city, right?
Right. And what I'm saying is there's a question here because the allocation of funds between port funds and city matching funds is that the city's matching funds are paying for the heritage display boards, all of it, and all of the walking tour printed sign, and 500 of the $4,000 for marketing promotion. So it's a question, if you don't then do the Locals First Guide, that's $2,500 off the port's side of the equation. And if you're only doing half of the marketing and promotion, in theory, that's $250 that the city is then not expending on that because it's.
So we've basically already eaten up all the city's $6,500. So we're voting to make the port pay.
Well, but the thing that I don't know, because this has never been discussed with the Port of Seattle, it's something we would have to have a discussion with them about, is if you're going to take an element out, do we just divvy up that, do we just split it 50-50 or two-thirds, or one-third, two-third, whatever with the port? Or do we do it per this table? We've never asked that question.
What are the things that the city is the specific numbers that the city has agreed to pay for the heritage boards and what? The city's portion is paying for something, is a specific
The heritage
items.
display boards, the walking tour printed sign, and a fraction of marketing promotion.
So 4,000 plus 3,000 is on the city's dime, 100%, which actually exceeds the 6,500.
There's $1,000 of in-kind attached to the walking tour sign.
Okay.
It's for city, it's for some of Joan and Gail.
So it's $3,000 for that, plus the heritage boards of $3,000.
Correct.
So $6,000 of our $6,500 contribution is already done.
According to this table, yes.
So tonight, we're voting to spend 500 additional city dollars and make the port pay. If I understand that correctly, we've spent a lot of time talking about how to make the port pay.
I just need to jump in and correct, this, illustrating the dangers of reading from a laptop without zooming in. The termination for convenience provision allows the port to terminate on 30 days written notice for convenience for any purpose. And otherwise, under section 3, under responsibilities of the agency, it says the agency shall complete the project by November 1, 2019. And as staff has indicated, the port is amenable to giving the city to December 1st. So it is not a two-way termination there for convenience provision that I can now see if I zoom in. So my apologies for incorrect information a few moments ago.
Councilmember Mayhew.
It is so remarkably convenient that in 5 days of contract effectiveness, 100% of the city's funds were spent and 0% of the port's funds were spent, or maybe something $500 different. This defies comprehension. There's no way I will vote for this. This is not a reasonable story coming to us.
You approved the port grant.
I'm sorry, if we're going to debate, Mayor, I asked you before that meeting if I should make a motion to rescind or a motion to the motion that was actually made, and based on the assurance that no activity had happened under the contract, I did not make a motion to rescind. That's what happened.
Yeah, my point is, I guess I would refute the idea that somehow we've been acting recklessly. it's not a massive amount of money, as you can see. We didn't, the council approved to receive a port grant that we had in prior years with an ongoing project.
Point of order, Mayor, I
Knew that
don't
it
think we should be debating each other like
only
this.
going to be
This is
spent
not,
on a
point
specific
of order, Mayor.
activity that had already been going on for 2 years.
Appeal to the council. Point of order.
Yeah, respond to the point.
I don't hear the council weighing in.
What?
All right, Councilmember Shepherd.
Oh, we have had our, experts that are, our businesses telling us that we need to be really looking at this carefully, and I feel that we've really missed listening to that message for quite a while. And my biggest concern is that we don't have great presence when it comes to just a general Google of Snoqualmie for our local businesses, and I think that our businesses need that support. And I don't see Savor Snoqualmie popping up for pages. And I don't understand all of the elements, but having been in marketing, generally you've got like a walled garden where one thing refers to another element of the same marketing campaign. So for any piece that you're looking at, you're being directed within the walled garden of Savor Snoqualmie. If I don't know to key in Savor Snoqualmie, I won't find this component of the marketing campaign. And I've never seen the signs that we're referring to, the heritage display boards. I've not seen those. So I'm a little concerned that we're not getting our money's worth for this, and I don't know what the logistics are as far as what we owe. But I'm okay with cutting our losses and moving on.
Councilmember Holloway.
So, Mr. Sturbank, we're not obligated to spend the whole 19.5 from the port. We've spent 6,000 so far. I assume we could request some portion of funds from the port to cover that 6,000, correct? According to the proportions we have listed out in the overall grant.
I'm sorry, I'm not
So we've spent
sure I'm
$6,000
tracking it.
on this activity. According to the grant, I believe, rough order, 4,000 would be toward port money and 2,000 would be toward city money.
So, under the grant agreement, it provides that the agency must contribute local funds equivalent to at least 50% of the grant funds, and the grant funds are 13,000.
But if-
So if we've spent 6,000, we could ask the grant for 3,000 of that. Really?
Well,
What he's asking is who makes the allocation? Who decided that Snoqualmie paid for signs versus the port paying for signs? And can we split that?
Well, I'm just pointing I'm trying to get to what my commitment is in regards to this. My commitment, I know, is I've done $6,000 worth of work under this contract already. That $6,000, if I want to get it reimbursed, is it 3,000 city funds and 3,000 port funds? Or something along those lines?
I don't believe that the contract speaks to that kind of accounting allocation. I need to spend a little more time with it, but I'm not
Okay.
seeing anything that on its face allocates it. And there are some places, and Jason can jump in here, in the table in the project budget where some of those things are called out separately, but
So I guess I would like the motion for consideration that we approve items 1 through 4 at the original amount, which would be $12,750. And at least we cover those 4 items as recommended by staff in their current incantation with no additional funds.
Second.
Motion and a second as stated by Councilmember Holloway. Is there any discussion?
So,
Councilmember Jeans.
Brian, I guess I'm trying to understand your proposal. It sounds like
So
you're
staff's
committing-
proposal in part is to take funds from 5 and 6, move them up into items 1 through 4 to beef those up a little bit. And I also take in consideration that with work that was done between contract and agreement to suspend, there's $6,000 of effort already done. Okay? So my recommendation again is to do items 1 through 4 as staff is recommending, but at the original contract price, which lump sum total would be $12,750. And not move funds up to reimburse it. I'm uncomfortable about beefing this up because we, them, us, all of us have messed this up.
Is that plus the
I strongly
6,000
refute these constant comments that we've messed this up or something inappropriate or
Said
illegal's been
we,
done.
them,
I
us,
can't,
council
I can't
is
more
part of
strongly
that.
refute that.
Okay, my opinion.
We
your
accepted a port grant that was accepted on the understanding of past practice that was only for one specific use, and it's been these endeavors in partnership with the Greenway. And an agenda bill followed later with more specificity that, you know, you can get into the absolute letter of it, but I think that's a little.
Chair, I do not want to get into a debate.
No, but the chair's going
council
to, the
is
chair's going to
confused.
respond defending my administration, okay?
I'm saying all parties involved in this, we didn't keep this on the straight and narrow, so it's not a confusing matter right now.
No, I think we're
Council
looking
is part of
focus on the
that.
big picture, because there's, you know, I can't see how I'm going to successfully get a port grant after this sort of response. You know, we don't unilaterally tell all the partners what to do. This is going to crash and burn. I will not be able to get port grants. One of your primary goals is tourism, and you guys aren't focusing on the primary goal. You're down in the weeds trying to manage how this is implemented. Councilmember Sunwall.
So back to puppies and unicorns. I believe we're going to end up paying several $1,000s anyway based on the contract. And what I like about this halfway proposal that council member, what's your name?
Goofus.
Sorry, it's late already. Holloway has said is that we're basically going through 1 through 4, as it's stated in the contract. We'll kill 5 through 7, and whatever our proportional share of that remaining $12,000, we'll pay our half, and the port will pay their half, and we haven't completely walked away from the port contract. We've just made an amendment, and $6,000 has already been spent. So somebody's going to pay for that. We're going to at least pay for 3,000 of that. So that's why I'm supportive of trying to save face a little bit on this, but not double down on multiple confusing elements of this.
I guess I'm just trying to caution the council. It doesn't mean the port won't walk away from you in succeeding years. So don't be surprised.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, pass up on $17,000 to save 5. Councilmember Jeans.
Call a question.
All right, question's been called. This is a vote on the amendment from Councilmember.
Yes.
Question
Hall.
hasn't been called. There's been no
Oh,
second.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Second.
All those in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. So back to the amendment that was stated by Councilmember Holloway. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, motion is carried. Now we're back to the original amendment with the amendment approved by Councilmember Holloway.
Call the question.
Question's been called. All those in favor of calling the question?
Sorry, that hasn't been seconded, Mayor.
A
All right,
second.
sorry.
Second.
Correct. We have a motion and a second. Bob, you seconded? Okay, there's been a motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, now we're back to the original motion with the amendment as amended by Councilmember Holloway. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
All right, motion is carried.
Move to extend the meeting past to 10 o'clock. We haven't even started
Point of order, can we take a 5-minute break?
at 10
Yeah,
o'clock.
that sounds good. We'll come back at 9:40.
Thank you.
we gotten
I
through
said
half of the
9:40
agenda?
still.
Oh,
No.
Right. Snoqualmie City Council back in session. Moving back under ordinances, Agenda Bill 19141, ordinance levying the general taxes and levying excess property taxes for the city of Snoqualmie for the fiscal year commencing January 1st, 2020 on all property, both real and personal in said city, which is subject to taxation. The general taxes for the purposes of paying sufficient revenue to carry on the department of said city for the ensuing year, and the excess property tax levy is for the purpose of paying debt service on the city's unlimited tax general obligation bonds. 2016, all is required by law, and providing for collection thereof. Again, this is for introduction only tonight, so if you could just read the summary statement, please.
City of Snoqualmie requires a regular levy in the amount of $8,279,560, which includes an increased property tax revenue from the previous year and amounts resulting from the addition of new construction and improvements to property and any increase in value of state assessed property, and amounts authorized by law as a result of any annexation that has occurred, and refunds made in order to discharge the expected expenses and obligations of the city of Snoqualmie and in its best interest. In addition, the city of Snoqualmie requires an excess levy in the amount of $247,607 to provide the money necessary to pay the annual debt service requirements on the city's unlimited tax general obligation bonds from 2016. And I would recommend, council, that we had this discussion on the prior, and we can hold it and move on unless there are objections.
move to call the question.
No, there's no question.
Oh,
No question until 2 weeks.
Okay. All right, so with that, we're going to move on.
we can just do that? Brian can just say we're not going to talk about it? No, I'm actually being serious.
Okay.
I can suggest that we've already had the discussion on the prior agenda bill, and this is for introduction tonight. So unless you want to talk about it, we can move on.
Is there any objection?
No, that's why I was going to call a question. I'm talking about it. I'm just, listen, there's dinosaurs. Mr. Dinosaur here was going to.
There's no motion, though. There's no motion to be debated or call a question on.
Okay, fine.
All right, moving on to reports, Parks and Public Works Committee, Agenda Bill 19142, purchase of the 2024 F-450 truck chassis extended cab four-wheel drive for the Snoqualmie Fire Department, including refurbish and remount of existing city-owned Braun Northwest patient compartment.
Move to approve the purchase of one 2024 F-450 truck chassis extended cab four-wheel drive for the Snoqualmie Fire Department, including refurbish and remount of existing city-owned Braun Northwest patient compartment, and authorize the mayor. Should that say to sign? Or to do the same? Are we going to have two trucks?
Matt, you're buying a truck.
Okay, so we're having two F-450s. No. I think that's supposed to say and authorize the mayor to sign.
I thought I said purchase of one 2020 F-450.
I don't know if it was a buy one, get one or something. So, sorry. So, if I don't laugh, I sleep. So just real quick on this, we talked about this 6 or 9 months ago about the aging aid car.
Second. Your motion.
He has a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19103 as stated by Councilmember Sunwell.
Thank you.
Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, is there any discussion, Council? Councilmember Sunwell.
So we talked about this a while ago, and the idea is how to address, this is our primary aid car. Secondary aid car that needs some work. The one option is to completely replace it. The other option is to refurbish the cab and buy a new chassis, and that's what's being proposed here. I believe there's also a lift component to it that allows the beds to go in easier than our current cab or current cabinet, not cabinet. What do they sit in?
Patient compartment.
Patient compartment. There we go. Allows them to more easily lift that into. So, if you want to explain more on what that is, you can, or maybe just if there's questions. I'm not the chair, so.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Just a very small question. And I think it was incorporated in what we just heard, but I'm just not clear on it. I believe that the previous vehicle that we would be replacing was an F-350. This is an F-450, which I believe therefore is a bigger vehicle, and I'm just wondering why a bigger vehicle.
The configuration
Don Harris, Fleet Facility Supervisor. The configuration that the fire department requests for their equipment does not come in an F-350 because it's stretched out. It's an extended cab, and they do not have that capability of purchasing that F-350 in that configuration.
So-
It's got to have a cab to axle of a certain dimension for that box to fit in the wheel wells, which is basically from the back of the cab to the axle itself. Only comes in an F-450.
So there's another really cool answer to that. Can I jump in? That is that because it is an extended cab, they can now carry a fire equipment gear. And so that allows the aid car to have firemen in there as well, which is another delivery vehicle, literal and figurative, for that. So it actually increases the seating capacity as well as an ability to put fire equipment in that cab. So it's actually sort of a really cool thing.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So we're replacing a 2006 vehicle, so it's how old, 13 years old, the one that we're replacing?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So do you think that the one that we're not really replacing it, though,
What typically happens is there's redundancy in the fire trucks and the aid cars. After 6 years, going on to the 7th year, they'll put the aid car that's first out now, which they consider their first unit, their primary unit, will now become the next 6 years in the second. So now the new one will take in the first life for the first 6 years. So there's always a rotation, goes from first to second, and then it ends up being surplused after that.
So normally I would ask about competitive bidding, but I think this is just so complicated that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do a whole lot of.
Chassis itself is off the state contract, which we purchase all of our
Okay.
other vehicles from. And then the Braun aid unit, the refurbishment, that also is a competitive bidder for the state of Washington for aid units, for refurbishment and new products. So if we were to go there to buy new ones, they would be already involved in the piggyback process that we'd utilize through the state of Washington. So
How long did it take you to figure out what's the best path to follow? This just sounds.
because of the
I'm
configuration.
sorry, that's not relevant to the conversation. Any other questions, Councilmember Simo?
Just two other quick comments. So you're probably going to ask, is it cheaper to get a new one? And based on what we talked about, it's about 10% cheaper to do this, to go this route. The one downside is they do estimate that aid car will be offline for 90 days.
Correct.
So that does leave us with one aid car. The fire chief, I grilled him extensively on how he felt with that, and with joint aid and things, he was comfortable that we could service the needs of Snoqualmie with that one aid car, given that we would have backup from Fall City and Eastside Fire out of North Bend. And frankly, we have fire trucks that can transport as well, and usually they're on the scene anyway. So that, just in case those were going to go. That's all I have.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Don, thank you for your patience tonight.
Okay, he's not done.
The undercard.
All right, Agenda Bill 19143, purchase of one 2020 Cargo Mate Blazer enclosed equipment trailer for Emergency Management Department.
Move to approve the purchase order of one 2020 Cargo Mate Blazer enclosed equipment trailer for the Emergency Management Department and authorize. I don't think the ROA is going to be okay with you having an aid car and a trailer in your driveway. Authorize the mayor to do this, the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19143 as stated by Councilmember Sumwell. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Is there any discussion, council?
So,
Mayor.
Councilmember Ross.
What's going to pull this?
Actually, the support unit, the pickup truck that Chief Bailey drives right now, it's a support unit. It's a 3/4 ton truck.
Okay.
Also, the aid car will have a trailer hitch, also with a 7-pin connector that'll also be able to pull it. It's not recommended, but we can do it if needed. Basically, this will just be transported to a site typically, if it's gonna be in our city, we'll be down at like our, by the bowling alley, basically, is where our, command center would be, or out in the parking lot at the fire station. So it'll be mobile that way.
And this is so it's our emergency management division, so we're gonna use it for
All
extreme.
types of, yeah, it's radio, it's floods.
CCAS.
CCAS, yeah, basically.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Just curious, what is an interim financial aid director? We have an interim financial aid director.
Where is this?
Brian Krause, apparently interim financial aid director on this agenda memo. Other duties as assigned, maybe? I don't know how that got there. But
It's a
we'll check that.
typographical error.
The mayor should get one of those too.
Any further discussion, council? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. All right, I'm going to ask the committee chairs to please help me plug the consent agenda items into the appropriate committees. Are there any others for Parks and Public Works up above?
There was not. No. No. Pacific Office Automation, that wasn't mine, was it?
I don't think any of them are.
Okay.
All right, so we'll move on. Any other report for Parks and Public Works Committee?
That should do her.
Community Development Committee, Agenda Bill 19103, Contract for Services Agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and the Mountain Sound Agreement. I'm sorry.
I think we've done.
Any other report for Community Development?
I think we've got 2 additional agenda bills, Mayor.
All right.
122 and 136.
We'll go back to the consent
Agenda Bill 136, Approval of Lodging Tax Advisory Committee Recommendations for the 2020 funding allocations.
Move to approve Lodging Tax Advisory Committee recommendation for 2020 funding allocations.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19136 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Anna.
Anna Sotelo, 39075 Southeast Gamma Street. I just really first I just really want to clarify that I think Nicole Wiebe does a wonderful job, and I don't want anything to be misconstrued about my comments. My concern is, though, over the last 2 years, is that so this is now, our events are now considered a tourism by the sale tax money. It's now a tourism event. And I just really, there was a couple of things that I kept waiting for council members to bring up during committee meetings, and they never did, and I never had the opportunity to be able to bring them up. But the real thing was going through the whole interview, or not the interview process, but the whole job description process. And I think Councilmember Sunwall was part of that whole process. At that time, he was probably the chair of the CDC. And the real concern was tourism factor kept coming into her job description, that it couldn't be part of it, that there was absolutely no part of economic development or tourism in her job description. So again, I want to reiterate the fact that we're just kind of fluttering around when it comes to tourism. If now our community events are considered tourism, that's fine. That's fine if they are, but again, shouldn't the person who puts on these events now have tourism as part of her job description? And if that is the case, then maybe goal number 1 could be easier achieved if we had someone that's handling tourism. Again, this tourism money, and last year I remember saying, when is this ever, last 2 years I've been bringing this up, and it was, we had the snowstorms and we haven't had a chance, and now here we are back in November again. And I feel we have not gotten any farther than we were 2 years ago. And I'd really like to, and again, now there's going to be a couple more meetings before the end of the year, and it's not going to get anywhere higher than where it was. So again, I'm just very concerned on who's handling tourism. And the other thing is the chamber. They wanted all that money and they couldn't because of Save Our Snoqualmie and their website.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay, the reason I pulled this off the consent agenda is because we've had a number of meetings for the LTAC, and I felt that sometimes those meetings weren't announced and that our public weren't able to come to the meetings. And I'd really like to bring that to the council's attention, that our business community deserves to be notified about when the meetings are, and that they should be allowed to come to the meetings and have input to all the meetings when we're making decisions. It's about $90,000. And
I'm going to ask the council members to please make their comments and questions relevant to the agenda bill at hand. Those questions and considerations have nothing to do with the agenda bill. Do you have other questions?
I guess because of the lack of public engagement with our business community, I'm not inclined to vote for this.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion, council? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nope.
All right.
122, Mayor.
Thank you. Agenda Bill 19-122, approved the 2019 Annual Progress Report for the City of Snoqualmie Floodplain Management and Repetitive Loss Plan.
Move to approve the 2019 Annual Progress Report for the City of Snoqualmie Floodplain Management and Repetitive Loss Plan.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19-122 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Wayne.
Wayne Russell, 8438 Meadowbrook Way, Wildcat Way, Southeast. Anyhow, my concern is still, as I said, and I used the wrong elevations at the last meeting. I wasn't prepared. It was 420 feet, and I said 320, and I sent a letter to the council. But anyhow, my concern is with these LOMRs that were done, even like back in 2010, before we annexed the mill site, is the fact that an LOMR was done across the river by the city, and it wasn't even part of the city at the time. And these LOMRs, when the 420 feet is in a floodway and floodplain, and when you look at the maps, I still can't understand how we can say that 420 feet over here is in the floodway and 420 feet over here is in the floodplain, and I still believe one of these days FEMA is going to catch up with us. Because when the flood happens, everybody said it flooded 2 weeks ago. That wasn't a flood. Wouldn't even have to put knee boots on. Hip boots is minor, and chest waders are major. So anyhow, that is my concern, is what's going to happen when FEMA catches up with us when we do have the event. And I believe it's going to happen. It's in the good Lord and Mother Nature's hands. And we came close, and we dodged a bullet last February with the big blizzard. And it's going to happen again. And I'm sorry, folks, but I've been through too many. And like I say, the falls took away a foot, which is great. Those videos I gave you folks and I posted online, the water was down by 2 feet, and the parking lot at the high school was a lake. So anyhow, we're going to have problems. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Anybody else in public? All right, seeing no one else, Councilmember Shepherd, you pulled this off.
Right. The reason I pulled it off is because under Activity 320, it refers to firm maps, FIRM maps. And I don't think that we have those posted on our website. And so I just wanted to ask to get the firm maps to be grouped together with all the other flood items that we have.
The firm maps are actually in paper format. We get those from FEMA. We are able to create what's called a firmet, which is a site-specific firm map on FEMA's website, which is linked to our website. But if you want, I can work towards digitizing those maps and having them available.
Is it something that has to be constantly updated, or is it something that doesn't change frequently? Or?
No, the last firm panel update was 2010.
Oh, yeah, so that'd be great.
I'm sorry, Gwen, did you say, why would you need to digitize them if you can access them through the FEMA site?
If she wants them on
We
the
can
city
just provide-
website.
Well, hold on. It doesn't, no council member gets to just dedicate resources like that. There's no reason to duplicate resources if you can click on a link and have it done
Just
live.
Just provide the link, please.
All right, I will.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Is that it? Mm-hmm.
All right. Any further discussion, council? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Are there any other items for the Community Development Committee?
Yes, Mayor. Well, Council, we had a plan for a discussion tonight on HB 1406 funding options. And I suspect the hour's gotten too late and we're not doing that?
Yeah,
or we are, there you are. Are we doing that?
I wouldn't recommend taking on that topic, that length at this hour.
Right. So I had the same thought. We are starting to run up against a little bit of time pressure because we have an option, we have several options on what we can do under HB 1406, but we're going to have to make some preliminary decisions by, I want to say December, January.
Depending on which path you chose, the.
Hold on, point of order. Go ahead, Councilmember.
We didn't vote on the emergency.
That hasn't, I believe that's in the F&A committee. We haven't gotten to that yet.
Oh, okay.
But also, I need to make a motion to move past 10 o'clock, because that was never actually,
Oh, we did that around.
I don't think that was approved.
Second?
Right, motion and a second to move the meeting past 10 o'clock. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
No.
All right, could I please see a show of hands? All those in favor?
What are we doing?
Oh, wait,
A show of hands, all those in favor?
All
Aye.
those opposed?
All
Well,
those
wait a
opposed?
minute, just,
This is not complicated, folks. We're asking if you want to extend the meeting past 10 o'clock.
I just want to hear what you're asking.
All those in favor of extending the meeting past 10 o'clock, raise your hand, please. All those opposed? All right, motion is carried. Continue, please.
Okay, with,
Oh,
you were
yeah.
asking about timeline.
Yes, I was just, there was a discussion item under HB 1406, which we were going to ask the city attorney to give us a presentation on, given the late hour. I'm suspecting that wouldn't be that effective, but we are losing, therefore, 2 weeks against a fairly short
Right, but the
time.
one deadline that is the shortest, there are two possible deadlines. One is a December 13th deadline. The other is a February 20th deadline. To hit the December 13th deadline, you would need to essentially adopt a resolution, do first readings on ordinances at the next council meeting, and by the first meeting in December, take final action on an ordinance to put a tax measure on the ballot for February. I suspect that that is an overly aggressive and not achievable deadline in any case, and so you're really looking at, if you go down that road, taking action by February. So bumping tonight's discussion 2 weeks, I don't think costs you anything that you would have otherwise.
So that's
availed
exactly what I was hoping the city attorney would point out to us. So there was a theoretically or mathematically possible way to proceed on 1406 if we thought we could decide. It presumes two things: that we decide to take one of the options under 1406, which involves asking our citizens if they want to tax themselves to provide some broadly affordable housing. There's various options, but broadly to provide, to tax themselves to provide some money to do some things under affordable housing. There's two dates which we can consider doing that by. The earlier date would have required us to take some action at the next council meeting. So by not talking about that tonight, we're deciding that we won't be able to take advantage of that timing. Frankly, I don't think we were ever going to do that kind of timing anyway, so I don't think that we're making a decision that we wouldn't have made anyway. I think we always would have taken the time to get between now and February to really decide what, if anything, we want to move forward with. So I just want to make sure that you understand that by not having that discussion tonight, we're in essence making that decision not to try and do that hurry up. So if there's any objection to that, then we should go ahead and have this discussion. I really don't think that we were ever going to do that, so I don't think there's any reason that it's not okay to just put this off for 2 weeks.
Councilmember Summel.
So in other words, well, there's two aspects of this, if I remember correctly. There's one that we just have to say, yeah, we want that. And there's an additional piece that we have to go to voters for, which I think we've decided that we wouldn't do that until the April ballot anyway. So my question is what is the deadline on the, yeah, we want that from the state part?
That deadline is January 27th, and it's a
Okay.
resolution of intent.
Okay.
So in that resolution, you need to kind of forecast what your next steps might be.
That's the free money, right?
Correct.
That's the
And
House
then-
share.
Okay.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, so I'm just, without getting us into the discussion, because I think the whole point is not to have the discussion tonight. The only thing that we're making a decision on, as you just heard, by not discussing this tonight, all we're doing is saying we wouldn't try to do something on a February special election, that if we were to do anything, it would be in April. I think we were always going to make that decision anyway. Just want to make sure you know that's the decision you're making by moving on. I think that's fine, but just want to make sure you know that.
Councilmember Holloway and then Councilmember Shepherd.
Motion to move the discussion item to next council meeting.
Second.
Guys.
That's it, I'm voting no. There was a second?
I have a motion and
I
a
did.
second.
I said second.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same as calling the question, almost the way you just threw it out there. All right, there's a motion and a second on the table. I'm a little at loss as to whether that's amendment or whatever, what just happened, but,
It's a motion to table to next council meeting.
all right.
Can you check your card?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right. Subject matter's been motion. I guess my only 2 cents worth on this, council, is to implore you to, there's also the budget of your time that you deal with, and the fact that we spent an hour tonight debating a $5,000 item and then passed up on this far more critical one that could provide $150,000 for our community. If you've sensed tremendous frustration on my part, that is the source of it. Not focusing on the big stuff. All right. Any other items? So there's no other items for Community Development Committee, I assume?
Correct, sir.
All right, Finance Administration Committee, back up to the consent agenda again.
All right, move to approve.
Agenda Bill 19138, Resolution 1525, ratifying the October 30th, 2019 proclamation of emergency for the Snoqualmie Valley Shelter Services temporary overnight warming shelter.
Move to ratify the proclamation of emergency in the Snoqualmie Valley Shelter Services temporary overnight warming shelter. May I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19138 as stated by Councilmember Holloway.
Chair has no comment other than there was an
I'm
emergency.
sorry, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? All right, seeing no move forward, any discussion? Chair, go ahead.
No discussion other than there was an emergency and we ought to move forward with this. I do
All right.
not understand taking it off consent agenda.
Councilman Shepherd, you pulled it off. Can you please state your concern?
Right, I don't understand what the purpose of the resolution is, because there's no budget impact. But there is in paragraph 2, it says, departments are authorized to enter into contracts and incur obligations necessary to respond to the above described emergency and to protect the health and safety of person and property. So I'm not clear, is this approving the ability to have future expenses, or is it literally no cost, and I'm not sure why we're having to approve it?
It's before the council because your adopted code provision in the emergency management title of the city code calls for the city council to, when practical, ratify any proclamation of emergency by the mayor. That's why it's before you. The proclamation, like this one did, as most do, includes not just whatever specific direction can be anticipated at the time, but an authorization to staff to take such other actions as might be deemed necessary. That's the section 2 that Councilmember Shepherd is referring to, I believe. There weren't any additional actions taken that I'm aware of by staff or expenditures incurred, other than the authorization to open the temporary shelter on those nights that were specified in the proclamation.
Councilmember Holloway.
Call the question.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion is carried. All those in favor of the original agenda bill?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion is carried. Agenda Bill 19140, approve lease agreement with the Pacific Office Automation, authorize the mayor to sign.
Move to approve the lease agreement with Pacific Automation and authorize the mayor to sign. May I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second is stated by Councilmember Holloway to approve Agenda Bill 19140. Is there a member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward. Any discussion? Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay, so the budget shown here is $2,800 or $2,900, but the actual amount of the contract is closer to $10,000. That's why I pulled this off.
Is there a question?
There's a discrepancy between what the budget is showing versus what the contract is showing.
Robert.
There's no discrepancy. That's the annual budget for the
The annual
that's a
budget.
copier contract.
Just an amendment to the existing
Times
contract.
4.
Yeah.
Councilmember Summerall.
There is so much opportunity for a simple email to be sent during the week asking these questions and not pulling these things off consent. These things go through committees for a reason, and a simple email on these last two could have answered these questions, and they would have been on consent. We'd probably be out of here.
Mayor, if staff receives those from council, we'll be happy to comply. We'll obviously copy back anybody and everybody on the council, as well as anybody who's on the standard list to receive the council agendas. We'd actually welcome that. Thank you.
Any further discussion, council? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Agenda Bill 19144, approve the publication of request for proposals soliciting proposals for Public Records Act request management software to assist in managing, tracking, and reporting on public records requests and responses.
I think this is one we already approved.
No.
No, it's a different one. Move to approve publication request for proposals soliciting proposals for Public Records Act request management software to assist in managing, tracking, and reporting on public records requests and responses. May I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second for Agenda Bill 19144, as stated by Councilmember Holloway. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, is there any discussion? There was no objection on this item. This was the one remaining on what was no longer a consent agenda, so I pulled it down in the committee. So if there's no further discussion or no objection, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, I think we covered all those items. The remaining ones are the warrants. Approval of warrants as stated in the agenda packet. Do I have a motion and a second?
Move to approve warrants as stated in the agenda package.
Second.
I have a motion and a second as stated by Councilmember Holloway to approve the warrants. Councilmember Shepherd. Or I'm sorry, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, Councilmember Shepherd. Or I'm sorry, I'm going to kick it to the chair of the F&A committee to first queue up and.
All right. I'm sorry. When Councilmember Shepherd's original approach and behavior to staff resulted in a breakdown of communications between council and staff, the council and committee put in place a process and form for addressing questions from council members, and that is in the F&A committee. That has occurred in this case. There were 5 questions submitted. 3 of them were immaterial to the warrants in question. 2 of them were immaterial and improper. Not in keeping, and improper in that they were not in keeping with the scope and the responsibility of the council. Councilmember Shepherd has been asked on several occasions of questions outstanding that she is still pulling warrants on, and to date has not provided that to the committee or to staff. Staff and committee is of the opinion that responses are current. It is up to Councilmember Shepherd to provide those outstanding questions. At that stage, I would like to call the question.
Second.
Motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nope.
All right, motion is carried, so we're back to the original motion to approve the warrants. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nope.
Okay. With that, I think are there any other outstanding items that were on the original consent agenda?
Councilmember Jeans added Public Engagement Committee update to Committee of the Whole.
All right, we're almost there, Mark, hold on. Any other items for the Finance Administration Committee?
No other items.
All right, Public Safety Committee, any items?
No items.
All right, we're at the Committee of the Whole, and Councilmember Jeans, I'll cue you up for the item you asked for.
After the last town hall meeting, which was at the high school, the committee met again and to discuss when we would be able to hold as promised, a 4th town hall meeting during the year 2019. And the committee's discussion came to the conclusion that we probably can't do it in December. We might be able to do it in January. We picked a date in January. I forget what it is, but it was the middle of January, sort of like, say, January 15th it was. And we had some discussion about the topic. We had some discussion about the location. And the topic we ran by the staff, the administration, and the administration was not enamored with our general idea what the topic should be. So, man, I hate to throw something open to discussion at this time of the evening, but what are your thoughts on whether we ought to have a fourth town hall meeting, and when and what topic and where.
Can you share with us what that topic was?
We were, well, you were on the.
I know it was my idea, but since you're talking, keep going.
We hope that the police chief would share some of his thoughts about how we're doing, sort of an update, sort of a presentation by the police chief, and then throw it open for discussion, town hall meeting.
As well as the fire chief too, correct?
Yeah, the fire chief.
And I think there's going to be
sort
held
of
at the fire
public
station.
safety center.
So not to put you on the spot, but I'd be curious as to why that wasn't amenable to the administration. Seems like a softball type thing. Not that I'm a softball guy.
I'm familiar with this. I'm not sure if we caught the question. What was the?
So I'm curious as to why the administration was not supportive of that topic for a town hall.
I wasn't in on that conversation. What topic specifically?
The police and fire.
I wasn't on the conversation, so I don't know who.
So,
from the
okay,
staff-
Bob, who in the administration indicated that they weren't happy with that?
The mayor. I didn't have a conversation with him. Jim, did you have a conversation with him? Hate to do this to you, but,
I have no comment.
okay.
So I would like, these are council thingies.
Yeah.
And I guess if, I'm not suggesting the administration would, I guess they could withhold resources, maybe. But I do think, we live in the safest city in Washington. I think it's a topic I don't know that has been communicated at this sort of way. And I think it'd be a fantastic opportunity for families in our community to come to the fire station if that's where we agreed to have it. And experience the firefighters, Phoebe, the police, and sort of talk about the things that they're seeing and things that are going on in our community and what we can do as a community to be even more vigilant. And that was just my thought. I thought it was a super easy softball thing to do and hold and do it in one of our own facilities, and we have the vehicles there if they want to do tours. So unless the administration is vehemently opposed to it, I'd like to stick with that. It's something that's easy to put together, and I think it's one of those topics that I think mom and dad could bring the kids to, and it would be relevant.
And if someone were to break up a point of, well, what's a town hall meeting? Well, it's whatever we want it to be.
Exactly.
Jim?
Yeah, I would just say, I had cause to talk to a lot of citizens at their doors recently, and there was a fair number that had thoughts about public safety type issues, and just questions, why this, why that, or could something more be done? And I think, it wasn't a sort of a critical nature of discussion. It was more, I've got this concern, and what does our community do about concerns? For example, what does our community do about concerns around school bus pickups when it gets dark, like it is this time of year? Or, what about speeders on this particular street, or so on? So, the sense I had was that this kind of things that, people think about in the community, and a chance to kind of come down and talk, to the chief, and be heard on that, I think is just what it seems like a fantastic outreach kind of thing, and that residents would appreciate it, and it's a good open way to communicate with the public safety folks. It seemed like it could be interesting.
So I guess I would say, the three of us are on the little ad hoc committee. Do you guys, as council, have any objection with us moving forward on a topic like that, and a time frame like that, and a location like that?
Have you reached out to the chiefs for their input?
Yes.
He was nodding, like he likes to do that kind of stuff, like, hey, look at my gun.
I know he does coffee with the cop. They do those, or they have kind of their own town hall meetings.
Yeah, he's armed.
Oh, he's armed?
Want me to have an input or not?
Sure.
And we would look forward to any opportunity to brag about ourselves a little bit, and also get some input from the community to see how we can do things better. Yeah, we would embrace it.
So my final question is, does the administration have any problems with that?
I think some conversations behind the scenes at this point would be a better course of action, so we'll discuss it with staff at the executive staff meeting
Okay.
tomorrow morning then. Happy to discuss it with some of the members of the committee further.
So that would be good for you to have a discussion with your staff and then get back to us, and then we can see what we can come up with.
Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you.
Councilmember Shepherd?
One comment that I've seen mentioned is what the cost has been as far as putting on these town hall meetings, and I don't know what our budget process is regarding the town hall meetings, but it would be nice to understand what we're expecting to spend on them, and you know, breaking it into smaller groups, or whether we're going to have town hall meetings in the future that allow people to come in and bring in their own subjects that they'd like to bring up.
That sounds like something that we might discuss at our retreat, sort of like how to proceed in the future, or whether to proceed with these in the future. That seem reasonable? Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Silence is, yeah, exactly. Move to adjourn?
Not quite.
Second?
No, I'm sorry. I was, sorry.
Yes, we have a second now. Okay,
Mayor.
there's been a
I withdraw my move to whatever I said.
All right. Just a quick note, the staff reports are written in the first meeting of the month. However, at this time, are there any other questions from the staff? Bob?
I had a phone discussion with your facilitator from October 17th, Una Callendon, and she asked me to ask you folks if you'd like to have her come in and provide you with a briefing of the meeting.
Does that cost us extra?
Or a debrief?
I didn't ask her that, but I don't think it'd be very long. She's already got her notes from the meeting, but it's up to you folks what you want to do.
Councilmember Mayhew?
I think maybe that'd be, I hate to put it all the way off to our retreat, but it seems like that might be a great thing to talk about at the retreat, because I think one of the conversations that ought to come out of that is what next? Mm-hmm. And that seems like a discussion we might want to spend a little time with.
Good.
Almost telepathy. I mentioned the same thing to her. I said, we're going to start planning for the retreat. Might be a good topic the council we want to consider.
Yeah.
Because it's got a much larger potential than just that one meeting. Thank you.
All right, any other, so lastly, I guess, any other announcements for tonight? Just quickly note that tomorrow night, if you have not already registered, is the Snoqualmie Valley Governments Association networking dinner that will be up at the casino at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow night, November 13th. So if you do have an inclination to go to that, please contact, who are they to contact, Bob, since we don't have Jody or
To copy or send it to me, and then we'll make sure it gets done if you want to still attend.
Okay. Any other announcements before we conclude? All right, there being no further business coming for the council, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Enjoy.